The thing about family dinners is that they're never really about the food. They're elaborate traps disguised as pot roast and small talk, especially in my family. I should have known better than to accept my mother's invitation, but here I was, watching the familiar drama unfold over Helen's famous lasagna. Did you hear about Clyde? My mother's voice carried that practiced tone of concern she'd perfected over the years. They're being evicted next month. I kept my eyes on my plate, pushing a piece of garlic bread around. That's terrible, I said, knowing full well what was coming next. It is terrible, my father Dexter chimed in, right on cue, especially when there are perfectly good solutions available. The silence that followed was heavy with expectation. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting. I'm Livia, by the way, the family ATM, eternal disappointment, and apparently the solution to all of my brother's problems. That second condo of yours is just sitting there, my mother continued, reaching for her wine glass. He has children, Livia. Your niece and nephew need a home. I set down my fork. The condo isn't sitting empty, Mom. Ariel's been renting it for the past year. She's a great tenant, and that property is part of my retirement plan. Plans can change, my father said sharply. Family comes first. I took a slow sip of water, buying time. Clyde makes twice what Ariel does. If he hadn't quit his last 3 jobs, don't you dare judge your brother. My mother's voice cracked like a whip. He's trying his best. Unlike some people, he didn't have everything handed to him on a silver platter. I almost laughed at that. Everything handed to me? I'd worked 2 jobs through college, built my real estate portfolio from scratch, while Clyde, I can help him look for apartments in his price range, I offered, or maybe he could move in with you guys temporarily. Absolutely not, my father cut in. Your mother and I need our space. Besides, that's not the point. You have an extra property. You're single, no children. What do you need 2 homes for? Investment, security, future. I counted off on my fingers. The same reasons anyone— Listen to yourself. My mother's eyes welled up with tears. Right on schedule. So cold, so selfish. What happened to you, Livia? Where did we go wrong? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I should go. Thank you for dinner. Sit down, my father commanded. We're not finished discussing this. Yes, we are. I grabbed my purse. The condo isn't available. I'm sorry about Clyde's situation, but I can't or won't. My mother's voice had turned ugly. Your brother would give you the shirt off his back. Funny, since he still owes me $3,000 from last Christmas. I made it to the hallway before my mother's voice stopped me. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. An empty threat. She'd used it at least 12 times before. I turned to face them one last time. I love you both, but my answer is no. I was halfway to my car when I realized I'd forgotten my phone on their kitchen counter. Cursing under my breath, I turned back. The side door was always unlocked, and I could slip in quietly to grab it. But as I approached, I heard voices through the window. We can't believe she's doing this to us. My mother's voice, thick with tears. Don't worry. That was Clyde. When had he arrived? I talked to that guy I know. He says we can handle this ourselves. She thinks she's so smart with her precious investment property. Are you sure? My father now. If she finds out, she won't. Trust me. By next week, this will all be sorted out. One way or another. I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. Whatever they were planning, it couldn't be good. I'd seen that determined tone in Clyde's voice before, right before he borrowed my car in college and totaled it, claiming it was stolen. My phone could wait. I needed to make some calls of my own. As I drove home, my hands were steady on the wheel even as my mind raced. They thought I was the selfish one? Fine. They wanted to play games? Okay. But this time, I wasn't going to roll over and take it. This time, I was going to be ready for whatever they threw at me. Because the thing about family dinners is that they're never really about the food. Sometimes they're declarations of war. 3 days after the dinner from hell, my phone buzzed during a client meeting. Seeing Ariel's name flash across the screen, I excused myself to take the call. "Livia, I'm so sorry to bother you, but there's someone here trying to get into the condo." Her voice trembled. "They have a locksmith with them. They're saying it's family property and—" "Call the police. Now, I'm on my way." I broke every speed limit getting there. By the time I pulled up, a patrol car was already parked outside. And there they were, my father and Clyde, standing with a bewildered-looking locksmith while 2 officers took statements. "There she is." Clyde pointed at me. "Tell them, Livia. Tell them this is a family misunderstanding." I walked straight to the officers. "I'm the property owner. These men were attempting to break in and change the locks while my tenant is still legally occupying the unit." "That's a lie," my father shouted. "This property belongs to the family. We have every right." "Show them the paperwork then," I challenged, pulling out my phone. "Meanwhile, I have the deed right here, along with the current lease agreement." One of the officers, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed my documents. "Ma'am, would you like to press charges?" I looked at my father's reddening face, at Clyde's poorly concealed panic. "Not today, but I want this incident documented." After the officers left, taking the locksmith's information for their report, Clyde stepped toward me. "You've really done it now, sis. Mom's going to—" "Going to what?" I cut him off. "Going to cry? Manipulate? Threaten? Tell me, Clyde, how's that working out for you so far?" "This isn't over," my father growled. "Actually, it is." I turned to Ariel, who stood nervously in the doorway. "You okay?" She nodded. "I got everything on video just in case." "Our house." "Smart girl." I smiled at her before facing my family again. "Let me make something crystal clear. This property isn't just in my name anymore. It's in an irrevocable trust. Do you know what that means?" The blank looks on their faces said it all. It means you can't touch it. Ever. Not through guilt, not through lawyers, not through locksmiths. So unless you want to add criminal charges to your growing list of problems, stay away from my property and my tenant. "You planned this," my father accused, his voice low and dangerous. "You knew we'd need help, and you made sure we couldn't get to it. Your own family." "Actually, Natalia suggested the trust 6 months ago." I thought back to that conversation with my financial advisor and best friend. "Your brother's been asking about your properties," she'd said over coffee, "and your mom's been calling my office, trying to get information about your accounts. You need to protect yourself." I'd laughed it off then. "They're annoying, but they wouldn't actually try anything." "Trust me," she'd insisted. "I've seen this before. Family can be ruthless when money's involved. Let's set up the trust now, before you need it." Standing here now, watching my father and brother seethe with thwarted entitlement, I silently thanked Natalia for her foresight. "You've changed," Clyde spat. "You used to care about family. I still do. That's why I'm not pressing charges, but this is your only warning. Come near my property again, and I'll bury you in legal fees so deep, you'll need more than Mom's tears to dig you out." They left, but not before my father turned back. "Your mother will hear about this. You've broken her heart. Better her heart than my bank account," I called after him. Once they were gone, Ariel hugged me. "Thank you. I was so scared when they showed up. You did exactly the right thing by calling me." I checked the security cameras I'd installed after the dinner incident. "Send me that video you took, okay? Just in case." Back in my car, my phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. "You actually think you're safe? Check Clyde's financials. You're not the only one he's trying to screw over." I stared at the message, my hands shaking slightly. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to believe this was the end of their schemes. But I knew better. This was just the beginning. I pulled up Natalia's number. "Hey, Remember when you said I might need a good private investigator someday? I think that day just arrived. Because the thing about family, sometimes protecting yourself from them is a full-time job. Jesse Black's office looked exactly like you'd expect a private investigator's workspace to look. Organized chaos of files, multiple monitors, and coffee cups everywhere. She scrolled through documents while I tried to process what she'd just told me. Run that by me again, I said, leaning forward. You're saying Clyde already had money? Had being the operative word. Jessie turned one of her monitors toward me. Your grandfather left him a substantial inheritance 5 years ago, nearly $500,000. My coffee went cold in my hands. That's impossible. They've been crying poverty for years. Clyde's always borrowing money, saying they can barely afford groceries. Oh, he burned through it fast enough. Jessie pulled up bank statements, casino withdrawals, failed business ventures, luxury car leases. But here's where it gets interesting. She pointed to a series of transfers. These went to shell companies registered under your father's name. The room seemed to tilt. My father's involved? Deeply. Look at these dates. More documents appeared on screen. Every time Clyde made a major withdrawal, a corresponding amount would show up in one of your father's business accounts, usually disguised as consulting fees. But why would they hide this from me? They're always asking for... The realization hit like a slap. They didn't want me to know they had money when they were begging for mine. Bingo! Jessie sat back. And there's more. Your father's been moving retirement funds through these same shell companies. From what I can tell, he's naming Clyde as a silent partner to avoid some pretty serious tax implications. My phone buzzed. A text from Natalia. Your mother and father just showed up at my office. They're making a scene. I have to go, I told Jessie, standing up. Send me everything you have, and keep digging. I made it to Natalia's office in record time. The receptionist's wide eyes told me everything I needed to know. They're still in there, she whispered. Should I call security? Through the glass walls, I could see my parents facing off with Natalia, who maintained her professional calm even as my mother gesticulated wildly. I pushed open the door in time to hear, How dare you help her betray her family like this? This is a place of business, Natalia said firmly. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Not until you undo whatever you did with that trust, my father demanded. You turned our daughter against us. No, I announced from the doorway. You did that all by yourselves. They spun around. My mother's face crumpled into her practiced victim expression. How could you humiliate us like this, making us look like criminals in front of the police? Funny you should mention criminals. I pulled out my phone, pulling up the documents Jessie had just sent. Want to talk about Grandpa's inheritance? The one Clyde burned through while still begging me for money? The color drained from my father's face. Where did you... Or maybe we should discuss your shell companies. The creative accounting? I wonder what the IRS would think about... You wouldn't dare, my father growled, taking a step toward me. Natalia's hand moved to her desk phone. Sir, step back or I'm calling security. We're leaving, my mother announced, grabbing my father's arm. But this isn't over, Livia. You think you're so clever with your investigations and your trust, but you have no idea what you're doing to this family. I know exactly what I'm doing, I replied. I'm finally seeing it clearly. After they stormed out, Natalia hugged me. I'm so sorry. I never thought they'd show up here. I'm the one who's sorry, but thank you for everything. You were right about the trust. Don't thank me yet. She looked worried. They're desperate now. Desperate people do stupid things. My phone chimed with a voicemail notification. Lindsay's name appeared on the screen. I played it on speaker. Livia, please. My sister-in-law's voice broke with sobs. Clyde's talking about hurting himself. He says he can't take the shame, the pressure. If anything happens to him, it'll be your fault. His blood will be on your hands. Please, just give him the property. Before it's too late. I deleted the message. My hands steadied despite the rage building inside me. They're trying to manipulate you, Natalia said softly. I know. I gathered my things, and they just made a huge mistake. What are you going to do? I thought about the inheritance, the shell companies, the years of lies and manipulation. They want to play dirty? Fine. Let's see how they handle it when I stop playing nice. Because the thing about manipulation, it only works until your target decides they're done being manipulated. Lindsay's voicemail haunted me for exactly 6 minutes, the time it took to drive to Flynn's law office. My attorney was already waiting, documents spread across his desk like battle plans. Your brother's suicide threat, Flynn said, reviewing the voicemail I'd forwarded. Classic emotional extortion. We're documenting everything. Should I be worried? I asked, thinking of Clyde's theatrical tendencies. About his safety? No. About what this reveals about their tactics? Absolutely. Flynn pulled up a file on his computer. They're escalating. First, physical intimidation with the locksmith. Now, psychological warfare. We need to move fast. Natalia arrived with a stack of financial records. You're going to want to see these, she said, spreading them across Flynn's desk. Dexter's been busy. Look at these transfers. I leaned in, scanning the documents. These dates, they line up with every time I refuse the money. Exactly. Natalia pointed to specific transactions. Every time you said no, they moved funds between accounts. They were never desperate. They were hiding assets. My phone buzzed. Ariel again. Livia, Clyde and Lindsay are outside the building. They're telling everyone I'm squatting in their property, that you stole it from them. Stay inside, I ordered. I'm calling the police. Flynn held up a hand. Wait. Let's use this. Record everything they say. We need to establish a pattern of harassment. An hour later, I had what I needed. Video footage of Clyde screaming at my tenant, Lindsay dramatically sobbing about their homeless children, and multiple witnesses to their behavior. Perfect, Flynn said, reviewing the footage. Now, about those financial records. My phone rang again. Unknown number. Miss Summers, a stern voice asked. This is Capital One Fraud Department. We're calling about some unusual activity on your account. My blood ran cold as the representative detailed thousands in charges, all under my name, all authorized with my social security number. I never opened that account, I said, putting the call on speaker. The application was submitted last week, the rep explained. With all your correct information, Flynn was already typing. Identity theft. Add it to the list. After the call, I sat in stunned silence. Natalia squeezed my shoulder. You okay? They used my social, I said quietly. My own family. This is good, Flynn interjected. Well, not good, but useful. Identity theft is federal. They've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. What's our next move? I asked. We go nuclear. Flynn pulled out a fresh legal pad. First, we file fraud charges. Then, we prepare a civil suit detailing everything, the harassment, the financial crimes, all of it. But most importantly, he smiled grimly, we make it public. Public? My stomach lurched. They're counting on your silence, Natalia added. On your shame. Break that and their power crumbles. My phone chimed with a text from Lindsay. Hope you're happy. Clyde's in the hospital. This is all your fault. I showed it to Flynn, who immediately started typing on his phone. Checking local hospitals. Nothing. No admissions under his name in the last 24 hours. Another lie. That's it. I stood up, anger finally overwhelming caution. I'm done playing defense. What are you thinking? Natalia asked. They want to destroy my reputation? Fine. Let's see how they handle having their own dirty laundry aired out. I turned to Flynn. How quickly can we file those charges? Give me an hour. Good. Natalia, get me everything you have on Dexter's shell companies. Everything. Already compiled. I pulled out my own phone, opening my email. I'm sending everything to Jessie. Let's see what else she can dig up about their finances. Livia, Flynn cautioned, once we start this, there's no going back. They're family. No, I cut him off. Family doesn't commit fraud in your name. Family doesn't threaten and manipulate. Family doesn't... My phone rang again. This time it was the police. Ma'am, we're responding to a report of suspicious activity on your credit. Multiple accounts opened in your name, totaling over $50,000 in charges. I put the phone on speaker, letting Flynn and Natalia hear every detail. With each new revelation, my resolve strengthened. They hadn't just crossed a line, they'd obliterated it. File everything, I told Flynn after the call ended. Every charge, every threat, every lie. No more protecting them. Because the thing about family secrets, sometimes the only way to break their power is to drag them into the light. As I left Flynn's office, another text came through, this time from an unknown number. You think you're untouchable with your fancy lawyer? Wait until you see what's coming next. I smiled, screenshot the message and forwarded it to Flynn. Let them come. This time, I was ready. I found Clyde waiting in my office parking lot the next morning. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing the same martyred expression our mother had perfected. We need to talk, he said, pushing off his car. About the credit card fraud? I kept walking. Or about faking a suicide threat? He followed me to the building entrance. It wasn't supposed to go this far. Mom and Dad, they said, stop. I turned to face him. Just stop. I've seen the financial records, Clyde. I know about Grandpa's inheritance. His face went slack. How did you... $500,000, I said, watching him flinch. You had $500,000 while begging me for rent money, while letting Mom guilt me about your struggling family. You don't understand, he stammered. Dad said we needed to invest it in his business ventures. He promised it would triple. And the credit cards in my name? Was that Dad's idea too? He looked away. We were desperate. Desperate? I laughed bitterly. You were desperate after blowing through an inheritance that could have bought you a house? After helping Dad commit tax fraud? Keep your voice down, he grabbed my arm. I jerked away. Don't touch me. Ever. What do you want? His voice cracked. Money? Fine, I'll pay you back. Just drop this whole investigation thing. You're going to ruin everyone's lives. You did that yourself. I pulled out my phone, showing him the fraud report. I filed this morning. The police are involved now. All color drained from his face. You can't... Lindsay's pregnant again. If I go to jail... You should have thought about that before stealing my identity. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Lindsay's not pregnant. I called her doctor's office pretending to confirm an appointment. Nice try, though. It was Mom's idea, he blurted out. The credit cards, the pregnancy story, all of it. She said you'd never find out. We were desperate. You keep using that word, I cut him off. I don't think it means what you think it means. Please, he begged. I'll tell you everything. About Dad's schemes, Mom's plans, all of it. Just drop the charges. I studied him. My big brother, the golden child, now reduced to bargaining in a parking lot. You know what's funny? For years, I thought I was the family failure, the cold, selfish one who didn't care enough. But look at us now. My phone buzzed. Jessie's number. Your father's being audited, she said without preamble. IRS is looking into those shell companies. They're going to find everything. I watched Clyde's face as I replied, Good. Send me the details. Livia, he pleaded, think about what this will do to Mom and Dad. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about every Christmas they made me feel guilty for my success. Every time they called me selfish for not sharing with you. Every manipulation, every lie. A memory hit me. Being 16, winning a scholarship. Mom barely looked up from fawning over Clyde's C+ in math. "That's nice, dear," she'd said, "but your brother really applied himself." My phone chimed again. A text from Natalia. "Your mother just showed up at my office again. With CPS. "What?" I said aloud. "She's claiming you're endangering Clyde's children by forcing them into homelessness. They want to investigate you for child endangerment." I showed Clyde the message. Child endangerment? Really? He had the decency to look ashamed. I didn't know she was going to save it. I walked toward the building entrance. Tell Mom her little CPS stunt just cost her any chance of mercy. I'm done playing nice. What are you going to do? I swiped my key card, letting the door close between us. Watch the news. I'm sure you'll find out. Inside, I called Flynn. How quickly can we go public with everything? Give me an hour to prepare the press release. Do it. I sat at my desk, hands steady as I typed an email to Jesse. And Flynn, make sure everyone knows exactly who the real victims are in this story. Because the thing about family drama, once it goes public, there's no controlling the narrative, and I was done letting them control mine. My phone lit up with another text, from my mother this time. CPS is just the beginning. Back off now, or you'll regret it. I screenshot the threat and forwarded it to Flynn. The war was fully on now, and I intended to win it. The CPS workers looked as uncomfortable as I felt, sitting in my living room while I presented lease agreements, tenant records, and security footage proving that Clyde had never lived in my property. As you can see, I explained, pulling up Ariel's rental history, this unit has been continuously occupied by other tenants. My brother has his own residence across town. The senior investigator, a tired-looking woman named Sandra, reviewed the documents. This appears to be a misunderstanding, or... She glanced meaningfully at my mother, who sat rigid on my couch. A deliberate false report. This is ridiculous, my mother snapped. She's twisting everything. Those poor children. Mrs. Summers, Sandra interrupted, filing false reports is a serious offense. We're here to protect children, not to be used as a weapon in family disputes. Weapon? My mother's voice rose. You want to talk about weapons? Look at her. She jabbed a finger at me, sitting there with her precious documents, her perfect life, while her family suffers. You always were the problem. Ugly little girl. You'll die alone. You know that? No one could ever love someone so cold. Ma'am, Sandra stood up. This interview is over. She nodded to her colleague, who was already recording my mother's outburst on his tablet. We'll be noting this behavior in our report. After the CPS workers left, my mother remained, trembling with rage. You recorded that. You recorded me. Actually, my security system did. I gestured to the discreet cameras in my living room corners. The same system that caught Dad and Clyde trying to break into my property. The same one recording you right now. You think you're so clever. She stepped closer, her face twisted. You have no idea what's coming. We raised you, gave you everything. You gave me trauma, I corrected. Manipulation, guilt, a lifetime of feeling never good enough because I wouldn't play by your rules. Rules? She laughed sharply. You want to talk about rules? Check your phone. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A Reddit notification. My stomach dropped as I opened it. There, trending on Rami the Asshole, was a post from Clyde, ATA, for asking my heartless sister to help save my children from homelessness. The post was everything you'd expect. A masterpiece of manipulation, painting me as a monster who'd rather see children on the street than share my empty property. It already had thousands of upvotes, hundreds of comments calling me every name in the book. Social media's a funny thing, my mother smirked. People love a good villain story. I looked up from my phone, suddenly calm. You know what's funnier? Evidence. I opened my laptop, turning it to show her the folder I'd been building. Financial records, audio recordings, security footage, text messages, emails, everything documenting their months of harassment and fraud. I was going to handle this privately, I said, watching her face pale. But you just made it public. So let's give the internet what it really wants. The truth. You wouldn't dare. Try me. I started typing. Should I start with the inheritance Clyde blew through, Dad's tax fraud, the credit card theft, or maybe your false CPS report? I'll deny everything. With what evidence? I gestured to my cameras. Every threat you've made is recorded, every lie documented, and every scheme exposed. She grabbed her purse, hands shaking. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I stood up. You wanted a public fight? Congratulations. You got one. After she left, I called Flynn. How quickly can we respond to Clyde's Reddit post? Already drafting it, he said, with links to all the evidence. Once this goes live, their whole house of cards collapses, I finished. Do it. I walked to my window, watching my mother's car speed away. My phone buzzed again. Natalia this time. You okay? She asked. No, I admitted, but I will be. The truth always comes out, she said softly. Sometimes it just needs a push. I looked at my laptop, at the folder containing years of evidence, at Clyde's viral Reddit post attempting to destroy me. One click would change everything. One post would expose every lie, every manipulation, every crime. My finger hovered over the mouse. Part of me still hesitated. They were family after all. Then my mother's words echoed. Ugly little girl, you'll die alone. I clicked post because the thing about family? Sometimes the only way to heal is to let the whole world see exactly who they really are. The truth was out now, and there was no taking it back. My response post went viral within hours. The internet, it turns out, loves a good revenge story, especially one with receipts. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence laid bare for the world to see. Your post just hit the front page, Natalia said, refreshing her screen. The comments. People are sharing similar stories. You've started something. My phone hadn't stopped ringing. Local news, online journalists, podcast hosts, everyone wanted the full story. Clyde's original post was deleted, but screenshots lived forever, now side by side with the truth. Miss Summers? A reporter caught me outside the courthouse. Can you comment on your father's arrest? I turned to face the cameras. Everything I have to say is in the evidence I provided to authorities. But how do you feel about... How do I feel? I interrupted, surprising myself. I feel relieved. The truth is finally out. Financial abuse is still abuse. Family manipulation is still manipulation. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no more. Inside, Flynn waited with updates. Your father's being charged with tax evasion and fraud. Clyde's facing identity theft charges. Your mother, he checked his notes, the false CPS report is being investigated. And Lindsay left town last night, posted a long Facebook statement distancing herself from everything. Smart woman, finally. My phone buzzed. A text from Jessie. You need to see this. She'd forwarded a link to a local community Facebook group. There was my mother, posting a tearful video about her mentally unstable daughter destroying the family. Don't worry, Jessie added. I've got screenshots of her deleting comments that expose her lies. The next few days passed in a blur. More evidence emerged as others came forward. Former business partners my father had cheated, distant relatives who'd been scammed, old friends who'd witnessed the manipulation. Your story inspired my daughter to finally stand up to her abusive in-laws, one message read. I thought I was alone in dealing with financial abuse from family, said another. Thank you for showing me I'm not. A week after my post, I stood outside the courthouse again. My father had just been denied bail, flight risk, given the offshore accounts Jessie had uncovered. Was revenge worth it? a different reporter this time, holding out her microphone. I looked directly into the camera. This isn't revenge. This is justice. This is saying enough to years of abuse disguised as family obligation. This is showing others they don't have to accept manipulation just because it comes from people who share their DNA. My phone lit up with a notification. Clyde had posted again, this time a confession. Everything my sister said was true. I'm sorry. I need help. Later that evening, sitting in Flynn's office, we reviewed the aftermath. Your father's facing serious time, he said. The IRS doesn't play around. Clyde's agreed to testify against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. Your mother, he sighed. She's been served with restraining orders from 3 different people who came forward with harassment claims. And the condo? Safe in the trust, though given everything that's come out, I doubt they'll try anything else. My phone buzzed. Ariel. Just wanted you to know, I'm moving out next month. Saved enough for a down payment on my own place. You inspired me to stop waiting and take control of my life. That night, I drove past my parents' house, dark now, empty. My mother was staying with her sister, who'd posted a long rant about family loyalty that backfired spectacularly when someone shared screenshots of her own financial schemes. Natalia called as I pulled into my driveway. You trending again? Apparently. I unlocked my door. Did you see Clyde's confession? Yeah. Think he means it? Doesn't matter anymore. I settled onto my couch, feeling the weight of the past weeks. It's out of my hands now. The truth is doing its job. Any regrets? I thought about my father in his cell, my mother's tearful videos, Clyde's fall from grace. Only that I didn't do it sooner. Because the thing about karma, sometimes it needs a witness. Sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting in secret. It's simply standing in the light and telling the truth. My phone lit up one last time. Another message from a stranger. Your story gave me courage. Tomorrow, I'm finally telling my family no. I smiled, typing back. The truth will set you free. But first, it'll piss everyone off. And sitting there in my quiet house, surrounded by the aftermath of justice served, I felt nothing but peace. The silence in my condo felt different now, peaceful instead of lonely. I was sorting through old family photos when Ariel knocked on my door, holding a small gift bag. I know I still have 2 weeks left on the lease, she said, stepping inside, but I wanted to give you this before I moved out. Inside the bag was a framed quote. Sometimes the family we choose is stronger than the family we're born into. Thank you, I said, genuinely touched. And congratulations on your new place. I couldn't have done it without you showing me what standing up for yourself looks like? She hesitated. Have you heard from them? A letter came from my mother this morning. I nodded toward the unopened envelope on my coffee table. Haven't decided if I'm reading it. My phone buzzed. Natalia. Turn on Channel 7. Now. I grabbed the remote. There on screen was my father in his prison jumpsuit, being led into court. The headline scrolled, Local businessman pleads guilty in tax fraud scheme. In a surprising development, the reporter said, Dexter Summers has agreed to a plea deal, implicating several business associates in a years-long financial fraud operation. Ariel squeezed my hand as we watched. You okay? Better than okay. I muted the TV. It's finally over. My phone lit up again, this time with a message from Lindsay. I filed for divorce today. You were right about everything. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. Speaking of over, Ariel said, I heard your story is being featured in that documentary about financial abuse in families. They're interviewing me next week. I picked up my mother's letter. Want to witness me either making or regretting a decision? Open it. The letter was exactly what I expected. 3 pages of guilt, blame, and zero accountability. You've destroyed this family, she wrote. I hope you're happy in your empty life with your empty victory. I handed it to Ariel, who read it and shook her head. She still doesn't get it. No, I agreed, taking the letter to my fireplace. But I finally do. As the pages curled and blackened in the flames, my phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line read, "Thank you for saving my life. Dear Livia," it began, "I was going to give my manipulative family my entire retirement fund because family helps family. Then I read your story. Today I said no. They're furious, but I'm free. Thank you for showing me the way." Ariel read over my shoulder. "You've started a movement, you know. People are waking up. Maybe that's what this was all about." I gestured to the burning letter. Not revenge, not even justice, just truth. My doorbell rang. Natalia stood there with takeout bags. "Thought you might need dinner and a friend tonight." As we ate, more messages poured in. Stories of courage, of boundaries set, of freedom found. Each one a reminder that the price of truth, however heavy, was worth paying. "I have something to show you," Natalia said, pulling out her tablet. "Remember that post you made about turning pain into purpose?" She pulled up a website, Financial Freedom from Family Fraud, a resource center for people dealing with family financial abuse. "It launches next week," she explained. "People need guidance, support, legal resources. Your story showed us that." I stared at the screen, at the tagline, because love shouldn't cost you everything. "This is perfect," I whispered. My phone buzzed one last time. "Jesse, just got word. Your mother's sister is under investigation too. The whole house of cards is falling." Ariel raised her glass. "To karma." "To truth," Natalia added. "To freedom," I finished. Later, after they'd left, I walked through my quiet home. The photos I'd been sorting still lay scattered, memories of a family that never really existed except in carefully staged pictures. I gathered them up not to hide or burn, but to keep. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying the past, it's building a future that makes that past irrelevant. Opening my laptop, I began typing, "Dear Internet Family, today, someone asked if I regret exposing the truth. Here's my answer. The only thing I regret is believing I deserved the abuse. So here's what I want you to know. Because the thing about family, sometimes letting go is the strongest way to hold on to yourself. And sometimes karma doesn't just need a push. It needs a witness, a voice, and a community brave enough to say, 'Me too. I believe you. You're not alone.'" I hit post and smiled. The silence in my home wasn't just peaceful now. It was powerful.
Hello, I'm Patricia, my husband, Willie, and I live in a small annex attached to his parents' house. While I stay in the annex alone, Willie lives with his parents in the main house. This annex, once a simple project by Willie's grandfather as a retreat, has been converted into a livable space, though it's about the size of a standard room, and I've put in a lot of effort to make it cozy. In the first 4 years of our marriage, Willie and I lived in a regular apartment, but one day, his parents, who adore him deeply, expressed a strong wish for him to move back home. Overwhelmed by their emotional display of hugs and tears, Willie felt it was his duty to return to them, a decision that left me feeling a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Willie and I met at work, where he started as my subordinate. We dated for 4 years while he lived with his parents, which perhaps deepened his nostalgia for home. Despite moving out when we married, he had been raised with little involvement in household tasks, and his upbringing drew him back to the comfort of his parents' home. When I tried suggesting we split household duties, Willie seemed uneasy and admitted he'd never really done such tasks before. Each time I brought it up, he'd make a brief attempt, only to eventually shrug and say, "This isn't for me, Patricia, you're just better at it." While both of us worked full-time, I held a higher position, so I felt more inclined to share the responsibilities. However, after several exhausting attempts, I found it easier to handle things on my own. Our dynamic shifted when I started working remotely. Willie initially seemed surprised to see me home every day, though he quickly settled into the new routine, or so I thought. But as time passed, it became clear he hadn't fully grasped what working from home entailed. A few years into this arrangement, Willie's parents visited and expressed a longing to live closer to him. Watching their emotional reunion, I felt an unexpected sense of isolation. Eventually, respecting Willie's desire to be close to his family, we made the decision to move in with his parents. Throughout our relationship, Willie consistently chose locations close to his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or picking a job. For me, working remotely meant location didn't matter, but it often felt like we were uprooting ourselves to prioritize his parents' proximity. Once we moved in, Willie's mother warmly expressed gratitude, saying, "Thank you for caring for Willie, Patricia. Now, I'll take care of him. You can handle everything else." Initially, I thought this meant I'd be relieved from some of the daily chores, but I soon realized she had other plans. My mother-in-law began catering to Willie's every need, cooking special meals, washing and ironing his clothes, keeping his shoes immaculate, and buying various personal items just for him. Meanwhile, the rest of the household chores, including cooking and cleaning for his parents and me, fell entirely on me. Though I worked full-time, I found myself shouldering all the responsibilities of maintaining the larger family home. This new arrangement left me feeling disappointed. It seemed to bring Willie and his parents joy, but for me, it meant more responsibilities and no apparent benefits. One day, while cleaning, my father-in-law approached me hesitantly and asked if I could contribute financially. Confused, I asked for clarification, and he explained his difficulty in asking Willie to contribute, saying, "He's worked hard, and it's hard for me to ask him for money." This revelation added a new layer to the situation, highlighting the imbalance in both chores and finances. Previously, Willie and I had shared expenses when living in our apartment, but on shopping trips, he would often convince me to cover various costs, from extra groceries to clothes, and would respond childishly if I hesitated, accusing me of being stingy. Despite our financial disagreements, I found some comfort in knowing that Willie didn't interfere much with my daily life, but that changed dramatically when we moved in with his parents. While Willie stayed distant from my routine, his mother actively disrupted it. She frequently interrupted my work-from-home schedule, demanding that I prioritize household chores over my job. Often, she'd barge into my space, tugging at my clothes to pull me away from work, making it almost impossible to focus. Frustrated, I eventually brought this up with Willie, half expecting him to take his mother's side. Surprisingly, he listened attentively and assured me he'd talk to her about giving me some space. I was hopeful we'd reach a solution that would balance both my needs and theirs. But Willie's idea of a compromise was not what I expected. It involved relocating me to the annex, a small detached building on their property, effectively placing even more distance between us. One day, somewhat playfully, I asked Willie if I could completely remodel the annex, maybe even knock it down to build something new. To my surprise, he shrugged and said, "You can do whatever you want with it." His casual approval opened a door I hadn't anticipated, granting me a sense of autonomy I hadn't felt in a long time. Taking him at his word, I threw myself into transforming the annex, cleaning, repainting, and redoing the walls to make it my own. I noticed Willie never once stopped by to see the progress or show interest. It soon became clear that he had no intention of joining me in the annex. In this family setup, I was the outsider. Sometimes I'd come home from working late to find that Willie, his parents, and even extended family had gone out for a meal or planned an outing, often arranged by his mother. Over time, it felt as if these plans were intentionally made to exclude me, as if she hoped I might eventually leave her son. Yet, despite these dynamics, Willie's freedom over the annex became my opportunity. I poured myself into DIY projects, adding shelves, personal touches, and creating a space I loved. Surprisingly, once I moved out, neither Willie nor his parents ever showed interest in visiting the annex, even though they knew about my renovations. Their indifference underscored the reality: I was no longer a part of the family. Living apart from the main house, free from the constant disruptions and Willie's mother's presence, has brought me an unexpected sense of peace. I began to embrace my newfound independence. Living in the annex felt almost like having my own place, and the freedom was unexpectedly liberating. The physical separation meant my mother-in-law could no longer interfere with my work, and I found solace in this distance. During renovations, I installed new locks and upgraded security, turning the annex into my personal sanctuary. I made sure no one, not even Willie or his parents, could enter without my permission. This newfound privacy made me realize that this separation might actually be a blessing in disguise. But my mother-in-law seemed to sense my growing independence and wasn't about to let me find peace so easily. Her subtle attempts to drive me away started with small irritations, like placing trash by my door on garbage day or hosting barbecues without inviting me, making sure the smell of grilled meat drifted my way. I couldn't help but smile at the futility of her attempts. One day, she summoned me to the main house under the guise of offering leftovers. Sensing there was more to it, I went along. When I arrived, she was waiting for me alone in the living room. A single piece of paper placed dramatically on the table, a divorce form. It was clear she wanted to force this decision. Knowing that Willie would comply if she pushed, she glared and said smugly, "Isn't it time you gave up? There's no reason for you to stay married to Willie. Get out, you freeloading, unemployed woman." Her boldness took me aback, but her certainty only fueled my resolve. Filled with excitement at the prospect of freedom, I picked up the divorce form, saying, "I'll head to the city court right now. Thanks for this." My mother-in-law, expecting resistance, was stunned at my enthusiasm. I immediately submitted the papers, then packed my things, and headed to the main house to inform her. I told her the divorce was finalized and that she could do whatever she pleased with the annex. My upbeat response to leaving seemed to surprise her. Despite her clear satisfaction at my departure, she managed to wish me luck. Willie and his father, suddenly realizing I was actually leaving, looked at me with concern. "Are you really going? What will we do without Patricia?" they asked. I thanked them for the time I had spent in the annex and explained it was time to move on now that we were divorced. Within days, I moved into a luxury apartment I had planned on for some time. Soon after settling in, I received an unexpected call from my mother-in-law. Her voice was awkward as she began. "Patricia," I greeted her cheerfully, asking how things were going with the cabin. She quickly shifted to a more serious topic, mentioning finances. Apparently, Willie had told her I'd been giving his father $5,000 a month, something I was eager to clarify. Confirming her statement, I explained that, contrary to her earlier accusations of me being an unemployed freeloader, I was, in fact, gainfully employed. Her stunned silence over the phone spoke volumes. It seemed she genuinely believed I had quit my job entirely. I quickly set the record straight, sharing that not only had I moved on from my last position, but I was now the president of a new company that was pioneering a fully remote work system, a company very much at the forefront of modern work environments. Her response was a mix of disbelief and confusion, and I sighed, realizing that Willie, too, had likely been unaware of my professional growth. It only underscored the distance between us, not just physical, but in our understanding of each other. Living with his parents, it was clear he had never fully embraced his role as a husband. She then asked about my income, seemingly curious whether my new position had also come with a pay increase. I mentioned offhandedly that it was around $3 million, though this figure was a bit of an exaggeration, a simplification to avoid delving into the complexities of my actual earnings. She quickly seized on this, asking, "With that kind of money, could you lend us some? Your father-in-law was laid off, and he didn't tell anyone. We've been getting by with the $5,000 you've been giving us, but neither Willie nor I knew about his job loss until recently." This revelation helped me piece together my father-in-law's past remarks about feeling pitiful, having to ask his son for money. I realized now that his earlier words were more of a strategy to elicit financial help from me. They had subtly maneuvered this monthly $5,000 under the guise of shared expenses, banking on the assumption that my professional success equaled wealth. Back then, I didn't mind too much since it allowed me to live peacefully in the annex. But now, after my divorce from Willie, I felt no ties left to his family. When I pointed this out, my mother-in-law began to plead. "That's not true. To me and Willie, you're still family. Please come back to us." I declined, fully aware of the likelihood of being taken advantage of again. There were no benefits in returning to a relationship with Willie, and I found it ironic they still saw me as family after having pushed me out. Living on my own now feels liberating, similar to when I was married, except now my money goes toward myself, and I no longer see $5,000 siphoned off monthly. I much prefer this life. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call without hesitation, puzzled as to why they thought I'd ever consider returning. For my mother-in-law, I imagined this was a last-ditch effort. In reality, Willie's income was modest, and he had a well-known habit of avoiding responsibility, often saying, "I can't do it," and passing tasks on to others. This trait kept him from progressing in both his personal and professional life, and he remained a regular employee with no salary advancements. Now, with his father laid off and his mother being a housewife, they struggled to keep their large home and eventually had to sell it. Ironically, they all moved into the annex I had renovated, a space just right for one but cramped for three. Since then, I rarely think of them. I continue to enjoy my life peacefully, savoring the independence and tranquility that come with my new freedom. My mother-in-law kicked me out of her house the moment she found out I planned to give birth at my parents' home. She physically threw me out while I was still in my pajamas, refusing to let me put on shoes or even grab a jacket. With just my phone in hand, I called my mom, who was nearby. I ended up waiting for her at a local diner. When my mom and sister learned what had happened, they were furious and quickly made plans that would soon bring trouble for my mother-in-law and my husband. I'm Emma, 29 years old. I married Jerry, 31, a year ago. His father is the owner of a large company, and Jerry is being groomed to become the next CEO. Currently, he's getting experience at one of the smaller branches. We met at work, and I had no idea about his family's business empire until just before our wedding. His revelation that he was in line to take over as CEO completely surprised me. He was so confident and well-liked that once he explained, everything clicked, and suddenly I found myself as the wife of a future CEO. After our wedding, Jerry moved to the main office, while I continued my job. My father-in-law seemed supportive, saying, "I've heard you're a young leader at your workplace, keep up the good work." But my mother-in-law had a different perspective, questioning why a wife would prioritize work over her home. She strongly opposed my job, and I thought that living separately from Jerry's parents would keep the peace, but then they insisted we live together, and that's when the real problems began. My father-in-law mentioned how busy he was and suggested it would be helpful to have someone around to manage the household. Jerry agreed, saying, "I'm worried about Mom. I've always lived here. Moving now just wouldn't work for me." With that, I found myself cornered and reluctantly agreed to move in with my in-laws. Living under one roof brought a wave of challenges. My mother-in-law, who had already disapproved of my job, made my daily life difficult, insisting I quit and take on all the household chores while I worked full-time. If she spotted any imperfection in my cleaning, like a speck of dust or a stray hair, she demanded I redo it. I initially tried to respond positively, cleaning more thoroughly, but her scrutiny escalated to checking behind the TV or between dressers, which felt excessive. Eventually, I decided to stand my ground. "I can't clean those areas every day. I work just like Jerry. I'll do a thorough clean on weekends, so there's no need to redo everything today, right?" My mother-in-law's response was furious. "How dare you talk back to me like that?" she shouted, and in her anger, she called Jerry, falsely accusing me of yelling and twisting my words into something confrontational, complete with tears for effect. I hoped Jerry would see reason and defend me. "Mom, Emma is working too. Maybe you could be a bit more understanding," I thought he might say. Instead, he disappointed me. "Why did you upset Mom like that? She was just trying to help," he said, siding with her. This response highlighted the stark contrast in expectations and support within our family. "Why are you getting upset?" Jerry admonished me, firmly taking his mother's side. At that moment, I realized that the only person I might rely on in that household was my father-in-law, but his frequent absences left me navigating the tension alone. I quickly learned that standing up to my mother-in-law led to arguments that left me feeling defeated, as she would inevitably complain to Jerry, who offered no support. To avoid conflict, I adopted a quieter demeanor, believing it was the only way to maintain some semblance of peace. This strategy worked for a year until health issues prompted me to visit the doctor. The diagnosis wasn't just an illness. I was pregnant, hopeful yet anxious about how my family would react. I decided to share the news with Jerry first. "You know how I've been feeling unwell lately? Well, I went to the doctor, and guess what? I'm pregnant," I said. "That's fantastic, so I'm going to be a dad." "Huh? I can't wait. Do we know the gender yet?" he responded, his excitement palpable. "Not yet. Does it matter to you?" I asked, sensing his underlying expectations. "Of course it matters. It has to be a boy," he declared. As an only child, it seemed crucial to him that we have a son to continue the family legacy. "What if it's a girl?" I wondered aloud, worried about how this might affect our family dynamics. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's a boy," he reassured me, though I remained unconvinced. We agreed to wait until we knew the baby's gender before informing his parents. When we found out we were having a girl, I was overjoyed and determined not to fall into any gender biases. Jerry, however, was less than enthusiastic. "A girl? Are you sure? Can you get it checked again?" he asked, disappointment evident in his tone. His reaction left me feeling anxious about how my mother-in-law would respond. Despite his initial letdown, I dreaded the impending conversation with her, uncertain about how we would navigate the challenges ahead. Eventually, we realized we could no longer keep the pregnancy a secret from the in-laws. I gently nudged Jerry to break the news. "Well, I'm pregnant," he told them. My father-in-law's face lit up with genuine joy. "That's wonderful, Emma. We're finally going to have our first grandchild," he exclaimed. However, my mother-in-law's response was immediate and pointed. "So, what's the gender?" she asked, hesitation creeping into her voice. "It's a girl," I replied. "A girl, huh? I hope she's as lovely as you, Emma," my father-in-law said warmly, clearly unconcerned about the gender, but my mother-in-law's disappointment was palpable. "A girl, not a boy? It has to be a boy to make sense for Jerry," she muttered under her breath. I was taken aback by her reaction, but before the tension could escalate, my father-in-law intervened. "Honey, why would you say that? Whether it's a boy or a girl, they're still our grandchild. Can't you just be happy?" he chided gently. She fell silent after his reprimand, but I sensed her mood would shift again soon. True to my instincts, As soon as my father-in-law left for work the next day, she confronted me. Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can slack off on the housework. You're not planning to quit your job, are you? If not, keep up with your chores. Pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. Hearing these words from another woman, especially one who had experienced pregnancy herself, was startling. It made me reconsider whether staying here was truly the best choice for my child. My family home was about a 4-hour train ride away. Since my dad passed away early, my mom and older sister had been living there together. Perhaps if I shared everything with them, they would welcome me back. I began to feel that giving birth at my in-laws' place might not be the safest or most supportive option. I remembered how my family's home could offer a more nurturing environment, and I decided to call my mom immediately. "Mom, it's me, Emma. What's up? It's rare for you to call," she replied. "What's going on?" "I'm pregnant, and I was thinking, could I come home to give birth?" "You're pregnant? You should have told us sooner. Congratulations. Of course you can come home for the delivery, but have you talked this over with your in-laws yet?" "Not yet," I admitted. "Make sure to discuss it properly with them. If they agree, then I see no issue at all," Mom advised, emphasizing the importance of clear communication for the well-being of my baby. Encouraged by my mom's support, I felt a sense of hope for what lay ahead. I decided it was time to talk to my husband about my plan. "I'm thinking of going home for the birth," I said casually. "Oh, going home for the birth? I guess that's fine," he replied nonchalantly. "My mom's here, so things should be okay around the house." His quick agreement surprised me, but knowing my mother-in-law might resist, I turned to my father-in-law for support. After considering it for a moment, I approached him. "I think it might be best for everyone if I went home for the delivery. Would that be all right?" He seemed taken aback at first, but then he reassured me. "If that's what you want, Emma, then it's probably the best decision. I won't oppose it. Could you perhaps speak to your wife on my behalf?" I asked hesitantly. "I'll tell her," he promised, appearing supportive of my choice. With his backing, I felt confident that I could go home for the delivery without any issues. However, on the morning I was set to leave, I woke up to find my packed luggage missing. My heart sank as both Jerry and my father-in-law had already left for work, leaving me no choice but to confront my mother-in-law. "Do you know where my luggage is?" I asked, hesitating before the words came out. "Oh, that luggage? I got rid of it," she snapped. "I don't need a daughter-in-law who causes so much trouble. Don't ever come back," she shouted, her voice dripping with hostility. Stunned by her harsh dismissal, I realized that returning to my family was no longer just a preference. It had become a necessity for my peace and safety. As she shoved me out the front door, I barely had time to react. I hadn't even slipped on my shoes, still dressed in my pajamas, with only my smartphone in hand. The sound of the door locking behind me was a clear message from my mother-in-law. She wanted me gone, and she meant it. The thought struck me hard. If I lingered, that door might never open for me again. With that realization weighing on me, I turned to leave, but the summer heat made walking barefoot almost unbearable. I sought refuge in a nearby diner, where I used my only possession, my phone, to call my mom. She was furious about the situation and promised to arrive within an hour. Luckily, she wasn't far away. I spent that anxious hour in the diner, waiting for her. When she arrived, she wasted no time and drove me straight back to our family home, where my sister was already waiting. I shared everything, the harsh actions of my mother-in-law and the indifference I felt from my husband. My mom and sister exchanged quiet words, their whispers leaving me curious about what they were discussing. The next morning, being back at my family home felt like a breath of fresh air. When I stepped outside to fetch the newspaper, I was met with an unexpected sight. My mother-in-law and husband were kneeling on the doorstep. "Emma, I'm so sorry. It was all my fault. Please don't sever ties with my husband's company," my mother-in-law pleaded. "Emma, I'm sorry too. Can we continue doing business with my dad's company?" my husband added, regret evident in his voice. Confused, I had no idea what they were talking about. Suddenly, my mom and sister appeared behind me. "What on earth are you two doing causing a scene this early?" my mom asked sternly, her voice slicing through the morning air. "What does resuming business mean?" she pressed, eager to understand their sudden change of heart. To avoid any further disturbance, my mom invited them inside. The atmosphere was tense, filled with unspoken questions as we all stepped back into the house. Once everyone was seated, my husband began to plead his case. "Would you please consider doing business again with my dad's company?" he asked. My mom and sister, who managed the company my late father had left behind, listened intently, curious about the details. I turned to my mom. "What does it mean that they're doing business with my father-in-law's company?" "Yes, they work with one of their subsidiary companies," my mom explained. "It's a major company within their group, second only to the main office, and their top client is your mom's company," my husband added, looking at me. This revelation took me by surprise, and apparently, it surprised my husband too. I chuckled softly. That's news to me as well. As I thought back, I remembered my in-laws mentioning their long-standing mutual indebtedness when they first met. However, the warmth of nostalgia quickly faded when my mom interjected with firm resolve. I cannot continue doing business with a family that would send my daughter away in such a state with only her phone. I'm halting our business dealings, she declared. My mother-in-law, visibly shaken by this pronouncement, pleaded desperately. Please, I beg you, I'll do anything. Can you reconsider stopping the dealings with my husband's company? At that moment, my sister, with a knowing smirk, chimed in. You said you'd do anything, right? So you'll agree to Emma's divorce, and naturally, you'll pay alimony and child support, right? Her words echoed in my mind. Just the day before, I had spoken to my husband about the situation, and his response had been dismissive. It's what you deserve, isn't it? He had said coldly. That callous remark only solidified my decision. I found myself silently agreeing with my mom. Any affection I had left for my husband had vanished. I would have suggested divorce myself if my sister hadn't made the point so effectively. Thanks to her well-timed comment, the dynamics of the conversation shifted decisively in our favor. My mother-in-law, though reluctant, finally asked, even if it means agreeing to a divorce, will you resume business with my husband's company? With a knowing smirk, my mom pulled out her phone and made a call. It seems this lady agrees to my daughter's divorce. She spoke clearly into the receiver. My father-in-law's voice crackled through. Got it. Hey, Maria, I'm divorcing you and Jerry. You're fired. Those were the drastic terms he set for resuming business. My mom added firmly, I cannot forgive the two of you for how you treated Emma. You both deserve to face the consequences. This unexpected turn of events led to my mother-in-law losing her husband and my husband losing his job, income, and familial support. The fallout continued with a bitter divorce between my in-laws, expertly managed by a top-notch lawyer from my father-in-law's side. During the proceedings, assets were divided, resulting in my mother-in-law paying a significant sum to my husband and me. I, too, initiated my divorce. Living with a husband so heavily influenced by his mother was no longer an option for me. I received compensation for the emotional distress inflicted by both my mother-in-law and husband, as well as child support for our unborn child. The financial strain became so overwhelming for them that they had to tap into their savings and ultimately take on debt. Under the weight of my father-in-law's influence and my mom's resolve, my now ex-husband found it increasingly difficult to secure a job in his previous field. He ultimately had to switch careers, moving into customer service, a significant and humbling change that underscored the profound consequences of the family turmoil. However, he underestimated his new role and soon faced numerous complaints, leading to a swift termination. Now, he's living with his mother, barely scraping by with daily wage jobs. My mother-in-law and ex-husband, once accustomed to a lavish lifestyle thanks to my father-in-law's generosity, now reside in a cramped one-bedroom apartment. Their relationship, once close, has soured, and they argue frequently. I sometimes wonder if there's any hope or joy left in their lives. Meanwhile, I safely gave birth at home to a healthy baby girl, surrounded by the unwavering support of my mom and sister. As things settle down, I'm planning to join my mom's company, looking forward to a fresh start in my professional life. I did inform my ex-husband about our daughter's birth, but he hasn't followed up, showing little interest. All I expect from him is to fulfill his child support obligations. I have no intention of allowing him to be part of our daughter's life. From now on, my focus is on moving forward and building a fulfilling life with my daughter, supported by the love and strength of my family. Hi, I'm Pamela, and I'm 30 years old. I've been married to Patrick for 3 years, and we don't have kids yet. Our lives took a drastic turn when Patrick's father, Jesse, passed away unexpectedly from a heart attack. At the time, we were living in a different state, and the news hit us like a ton of bricks. During the funeral, Patrick's uncle hinted that, as the youngest and only son, Patrick should return home to support his mother through this tough time. A few months later, Patrick told me he had transferred to an office closer to his family. He made this decision unilaterally and informed me afterward, which hurt because such a significant choice should have involved both of us. When I expressed my frustration, Patrick apologized, admitting he had anticipated my objections. He knew I had a rocky relationship with his mother, Mary, which was mutual. When we lived farther away, our visits were limited to major holidays, mainly due to work. Mary often complained about our absences, frequently comparing us to Patrick's sisters, Amanda and Diane, who lived nearby and visited frequently. Despite the distances and costs, Patrick always defended our situation. While our relationship with Mary was tense, it had been manageable. However, her primary issue with me revolved around our childlessness. During a summer visit, She bluntly questioned my ability to have children, even comparing me to others. Ultimately, I decided to move closer, thinking we wouldn't be living together all the time anyway. To my surprise, Mary seemed genuinely pleased with my choice. 3 weeks later, she invited me over for tea, the first time I accepted such an invitation, albeit reluctantly. When I arrived at my in-laws' house, Mary and Amanda greeted me. "Pamela, it's been ages, why haven't you come to visit since moving here?" Amanda asked, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Already, I was regretting my decision to come," Mary chimed in cheerfully. "I was thrilled when you moved closer, but it seems I was mistaken. You don't like me, do you?" I wanted to confirm her suspicion just to see her reaction, but I held back. "I don't dislike you. I've just been feeling unwell adjusting to the new environment," I explained, partially true since I had been resting at home due to fatigue, and Patrick hadn't mentioned this visit. Why was I even here, enduring their harsh words? Mary quickly accused me of disliking her, but wasn't it the other way around? How are we supposed to get along under these circumstances? Amanda interjected sharply. "How can you speak to your mother-in-law like that? Apologize." I expected Mary to respond with anger, but instead, she caught me off guard. "You're right, I have been mean. I'm sorry, Pamela. I also regret my comments about children. I was being nosy." I braced for a lecture, anticipating some hidden snark, but none came. Even Amanda seemed surprised. "All I wanted was to hold a grandchild," Mary admitted. She explained that Amanda's husband was infertile, and Diane seemed to have fertility issues, so she had placed her hopes on Patrick and me. Despite knowing about Amanda and Diane's struggles, Patrick and I had discussed having children and were considering it, so I asked for some patience. "Please, just give us time," I said, lowering my gaze slightly. Despite everything, a sense of duty lingered within me. "I'm sorry, but do visit us sometimes." After that, Mary and Amanda returned to watching TV and sipping tea as if the earlier tension had vanished. "I like this announcer," Mary remarked about her favorite local personality. "She's so energetic and bright." As I watched them, I felt a pang of regret. Perhaps if I had been more outgoing, things could have been different with Mary and her family. It was a fleeting, naive thought. I was relieved to have shared my feelings that day, hoping it might lead to better relations, yet my optimism quickly faded. That evening, Patrick stormed in, visibly upset. "I heard from Mom that you said you don't want to get along." She was crying. "Pamela, what did you say to her?" I was stunned by his reaction. Just earlier, he had left with a smile, and now he seemed to accuse me of something entirely different. "Patrick, there's been a misunderstanding," I tried to clarify. "I told her it's hard for me to be friends given our current relationship." "How does that mean I don't want to get along?" I felt scared now. Patrick appeared to fully believe Mary's distorted version of events. His earlier smile now seemed deceptive, and I felt lost. I tried to explain further, but he wasn't convinced. Then my phone buzzed with a message from Amanda. "After all the effort of moving here, weren't you prepared to make it work? If you're here, you need to be a bit more patient." Patrick glanced at me as if echoing Amanda's words. I had moved here because I cared about being with him, not just to appease Mary and Amanda. Looking into Patrick's eyes, I said, "It's clear that Mary and the others may never approve of me. Maybe you should consider someone she likes more." The word divorce slipped out before I could catch it, and for the first time, Patrick looked genuinely alarmed. "Wait a minute, how did we end up at divorce? All I want is for you to get along better with my family," he said, bewildered by the sudden turn of our conversation. It was clear he couldn't comprehend that his family might never accept me, which left me equally baffled. Yet, Patrick seemed determined to resolve this misunderstanding. The following day, he returned home late from work and shared the details of his conversation with his mother. She had acknowledged the misunderstanding and apologized. "What a fuss this all turned out to be," he remarked casually. Then, he proposed that we celebrate Mary's upcoming birthday at a fancy restaurant. The abrupt shift from tension to talk of celebration caught me off guard, but it was evident that Patrick was making an effort to mend fences, even if the path ahead appeared rocky. Patrick suggested that if we framed the birthday dinner as my idea, it might improve his mother's perception of me. Although I was skeptical that Mary would genuinely appreciate such gestures, considering her complex personality, I agreed to make the reservation. I invited Amanda and the others, specifying a table for 8. Patrick agreed, but as the date approached, I began to feel increasingly uneasy. He had been distant lately, offering only curt, indifferent responses to my attempts at conversation, which left me feeling isolated. On the night of the dinner, we arrived at the restaurant to find Mary, Amanda, and their spouses already gathered. The host led us to our table, casting a questioning glance that only heightened my discomfort. "Happy birthday, Mary," I greeted her cheerfully, trying to bridge the gap. However, Mary didn't even acknowledge me. She turned to the others, thanking them for coming to her celebration. It felt like a deliberate snub. Amanda looked confused. "I thought today was a family gathering," she remarked, casting a brief, puzzled glance in my direction. Diane, sensing the tension, looked over with concern. In that moment, I realized I was being deliberately excluded. Resolving not to let this ruin my evening, I decided to keep to myself and leave early. Just as I was settling into this plan, a staff member approached our table with an awkward demeanor. "I'm sorry, but the reservation was actually made for 7 people," he informed us. Confused, I replied, "I distinctly reserved for 8. Could there be a mistake?" "No, it should definitely be for 8, I insisted, recalling my conversation with the restaurant. "Oh yes, but about a week ago, we received a call from a gentleman asking to change the number to 7, the worker explained. Stunned, I turned to Patrick, seeking an explanation. His response left me reeling. "Yes, please, service for 7, everyone's here now," he said plainly, confirming the change himself. In that moment, I felt a rush of betrayal and disbelief. Patrick's actions made it clear that, despite his reassurances, his commitment to smoothing family tensions was superficial at best. The realization that he had manipulated the situation behind my back was deeply unsettling, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be a joyful family gathering. I stood there, stunned, as Patrick turned to me with an accusatory glare. "I heard from Mom that you've been undermining our family, saying I don't earn enough and that I'm insensitive. You had a lot to say, huh?" It became clear that when Patrick had spoken to Mary about the dinner reservation a week ago, she had filled him with all sorts of falsehoods. Blinded by anger and believing her, he had called the restaurant pretending to be me and reduced the reservation from 8 to 7. The staff, recognizing the family surname, hadn't questioned the change. I couldn't understand how Patrick could be so easily misled in such a short time. With this realization, I questioned my place at the table. When I confronted Patrick, demanding he apologize to everyone present and reflect on his actions, he did something unexpected. He insisted that I should apologize to my in-laws and then go home alone to think things over. Naturally, I refused. I couldn't admit to something that wasn't my fault. I hadn't said, nor did I ever need, a husband who took his mother's word over mine. Tears of frustration welled in my eyes. Why had I followed him here? As I wrestled with my emotions, Patrick began to panic. But it was too late. Mary watched the scene unfold with a smug smile, clearly relishing the chaos she had orchestrated. I turned to Patrick, my voice icy. "Next time, marry a younger, more obedient daughter-in-law. Maybe then you'll have children and be happier." Mary's response was sharp and cutting. "Pamela, why don't you go back to your parents' house? A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. You're not charming at all, so just leave quickly." Her words stung, but they only strengthened my resolve. I didn't need her permission to leave. "I'd like to see someone who could actually tolerate someone as twisted as you," I shot back before turning to walk out of the restaurant. Patrick remained silent, his head buried in his hands. Just as I reached the exit, I heard someone calling my name. It was Diane and her husband. "Pamela, wait," Diane said, distress etched on her face. "I can't take it anymore. Mom and Amanda haven't changed at all. I always knew the gossip about you was false." Her acknowledgement amidst the chaos brought me a flicker of solace, as she expressed her readiness to distance herself from the toxicity. This moment of solidarity, however small, offered the support I desperately needed. As I absorbed Diane's words, my phone rang, flashing Mary's name. Ugh, what now? But before I could answer, Patrick's name replaced hers on the display. I muted the call under my breath, watching Diane and her husband exchange knowing looks. "Pamela, you might want to head back to the restaurant. Something interesting is happening," Diane suggested, her eyes glimmering with unspoken secrets. They left, looking oddly satisfied with themselves. Curiosity eventually won over my urge to escape the drama. When I answered Patrick's call, his voice was frantic, laced with panic. "Pamela, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was all a lie. I'll send the divorce papers later," he blurted out before quickly adding, "Wait, can you come back, please? It's a lifetime request." His almost childish plea almost made me laugh, but remembering Diane's cryptic hint, I decided to return to the restaurant. As I arrived, I was greeted by an unexpected scene. A crowd had gathered around Patrick's table, where a local TV announcer, Mary's favorite, was speaking into a microphone. The tension in the air was palpable. Mary was stumbling over her words, clearly struggling to defend herself. "No, that's not it. It's a misunderstanding," she stammered. Patrick and Amanda looked awkward and uneasy, clearly unprepared for this sudden turn of events. The announcer, microphone in hand, pressed Mary further. "You loudly declared in the restaurant that Pamela is an outsider and should leave. What did you mean by that? Please explain in detail." Meanwhile, Diane's husband and others who had been offended by earlier events had quietly slipped away. It all felt surreal as I stood there, somewhat stunned. I pieced together that this had become a public spectacle, possibly being broadcast live. I suddenly remembered I had forgotten to confirm the reservation details amidst the initial chaos. As I tried to grasp the situation, a staff member approached, noting my confusion. "It's been quite a day, hasn't it?" they said, explaining that a TV recording had been scheduled at the restaurant that very day, which explained the unexpected media presence. The entire ordeal had unfolded on live television, casting our family drama in stark, unfiltered light for all to see. As I processed the bizarre turn of events, I felt a mix of vindication and disbelief wash over me. Although the dining area provided some semblance of privacy, conversations were still easily overheard. Just as I stepped outside, a well-known TV announcer approached Mary with a bright smile, ready to conduct an interview. Mary, a huge fan, was visibly excited. "An interview? Absolutely," she exclaimed. "The topic? The often fraught relationships between daughter-in-laws and their mothers-in-law. We heard there was a heated argument earlier and that the daughter-in-law left in tears. Can you tell us what happened?" the announcer asked, putting Mary on the spot. Caught off guard by the direct question, both Mary and Amanda's faces paled, clearly unsure how to discuss the embarrassing truth behind their manipulation to alienate Patrick's wife. From a distance, Patrick spotted me and made a desperate plea. "Pamela, please, I can't let this shame be known. It was all a misunderstanding," he implored, looking utterly defeated. By that point, my feelings for him had all but evaporated. Mary attempted to smooth things over with a strange smile. "Oh, we usually call each other Pamela. Come over here," she beckoned. As I approached, the microphone swung in my direction. "You say you call each other Pamela, but how does the daughter-in-law view her mother-in-law?" the announcer asked. "I've never been called that," I replied calmly. "I've often been labeled unpatriotic for not having children, though that's because Patrick and I haven't felt ready or confident enough to start a family. We haven't even tried for over 2 years, and I've always been told that was grounds for divorce," I recounted. I went on to explain how Patrick had initially supported me when I fell ill and had to take leave from work. I appreciated his kindness and followed him here, hoping a change of environment would help, but this is what I got in return. By then, I was out of tears, replaced by a sense of detachment. Seeing Mary and Amanda's embarrassed expressions brought me a small sense of satisfaction. As I stood there, preparing for the possibility that this might be broadcast nationwide, I couldn't help but reflect on the surreal day. Noting Mary's distressed expression, when I mentioned the broadcast, a smile crept onto my face. "Well, since the daughter-in-law is considered an outsider, I guess I should take my leave. Goodbye," I said, savoring the moment as I exited the restaurant, ignoring the shouts and commotion that followed me. The day had been long and fraught, but in that final moment, I felt a profound sense of release. Walking away from the chaos, I felt a mix of relief and satisfaction. Although Mary and her family managed to prevent the broadcast of the footage, the incident quickly became a hot topic among our relatives and acquaintances, fueling gossip and speculation. In the aftermath, I returned to my room, packed my belongings, and moved back in with my parents. I sent the divorce papers to Patrick, but his response was delayed, prompting me to consider involving a lawyer. To my surprise, Patrick soon appeared at my parents' doorstep. My father, Peter, typically calm and composed, took charge of the situation with a firm hand. Patrick offered a heartfelt apology, expressing his desire to sever ties with his family and promising to trust only in me moving forward. However, his promises now felt hollow. Too little, too late. Peter, visibly upset by the years of distress Patrick had caused me, didn't hold back. "Why didn't you realize this sooner? What have you done to Pamela all these years? Just sign the divorce papers and leave," he instructed sternly, regret etched across his face. Patrick handed over the divorce papers, his handwriting shaky and barely legible. Despite the initial difficulties, the papers were processed successfully. It later emerged that Amanda had been the true cause of her infertility, a fact she had wrongfully attributed to her husband. Now on the brink of her own divorce, she no longer visited her in-laws. Patrick returned to live with his mother, Mary, in their small hometown, likely facing the uncomfortable rumors that lingered. But that chapter of my life was now closed. In the time that followed, life took a more positive turn for me. I reconnected with a classmate from my hometown, and we married. Our relationship blossomed with joy, and we soon welcomed a child. Now we have a 2-year-old daughter, and I am expecting our second child. My new mother-in-law is a true angel, supportive and kind, everything Mary was not. Life is unpredictable, but at this moment, I am living a fulfilling and happy life surrounded by love and support that I once thought was beyond my reach. After a tense interaction with my mother-in-law, where she harshly criticized my employment and educational background, Things escalated when she suddenly threw hot water at me. While I escaped unharmed, the danger was real and shocking. Her actions were unjustified, especially since it was my husband who was unemployed, not me. I couldn't stand her unreasonable behavior any longer. Enough was enough. If this is what you want, I have no choice but to leave, I said firmly. To my disbelief, she looked almost pleased, showing no remorse. Realizing I could no longer tolerate the toxic atmosphere, I decided to return to my parents' home. Little did she know that I had been the primary financial supporter of our household, making around $41,000 a month through stock trading after leaving my job. Even as I left, I felt confident that I could support myself independently. Eric and I met in college, where we both studied economics with dreams of building a career in finance. We started out working at separate brokerage firms, and when he proposed, I eagerly accepted. Our plans changed, though, when Eric asked me to quit my job and live with him at his mother's house after his father's passing. Despite some reluctance, I agreed out of respect for his family obligations. However, after everything that had happened, I deeply regretted that decision and resolved never to help his mother again, even if she faced financial hardship. Eric was his mother's sole companion after his father passed away during his middle school years, and as an only child, he felt a strong responsibility toward her. I understood his loyalty, so I agreed to move in, and within 3 weeks, we settled in his family home. Initially, his mother seemed happy to have him home, but her attitude shifted dramatically when it came to me. Her cold gaze and dismissive remarks made it clear that she didn't approve of me. I tried to stay positive, ignoring any faint mutterings she directed my way. Soon, living with her proved even harder than I had anticipated. One morning, she woke me up at 5 a.m., ordering me to make breakfast. Her reason? Don't just lie around because you're not working, she said curtly. Although the hour seemed absurd, I got up and prepared the meal, trying my best to ignore her constant critiques. By the time breakfast was ready, she still found reasons to complain. It was either the timing or the flavor, with her claiming my cooking was somehow an attempt to sabotage her health. Are you trying to kill me with these salty meals? She snapped at me. Her accusations were unsettling, and I couldn't hold back any longer. Why are you so harsh on me? I asked. What are you saying? I'm not being harsh. Are you trying to paint me as the bad guy? She shot back, overwhelmed. I could only nod silently as she listed off chores for the day, barely giving me a moment's rest. Her criticisms became relentless, nitpicking my every task. There was always dust I'd missed or a stain I'd overlooked. After about a month of this, I reached my breaking point. I confided in Eric, hoping he could help. Your mother's been so critical every day, could you ask her to ease up a bit? I asked him hesitantly. Eric's reaction surprised me. He looked pale and didn't respond immediately. Concerned, I asked, what's wrong? Did something happen? He hesitated before revealing that he had just been fired from his job. It's due to company downsizing, he explained. So, you're officially unemployed now? I asked, still in shock. Yes, I'll be let go in a month, he admitted. Thankfully, I'd been able to earn around $41,000 monthly through stock trading, using what I'd learned from my job in securities. With this income, we were financially stable, so I tried to console Eric, setting aside my grievances with his mother, for now. But as Eric's search for a new job lagged, he started spending more time at home, often making excuses. Meanwhile, I continued to endure my mother-in-law's harsh treatment, driven by my determination to support Eric through this difficult period. Shouldn't you start looking for a job more seriously? I suggested, hoping to motivate Eric to take his job search more earnestly. I'm looking, but it's hard to find a company that's a good fit, he replied, his tone lacking any sense of urgency or commitment to finding new work soon. Reluctantly, I continued supporting us financially, but my mother-in-law's sharp criticisms only grew harsher over time. Each day, I felt more drained and exhausted. At first, I convinced myself it was temporary and that I needed to be patient while Eric was out of work. But as the weeks passed, that justification faded, leaving me feeling worn down and unappreciated. One morning, Eric left early, perhaps to finally pursue job leads more seriously. After he was gone, I went about my usual chores. Make sure it's spotless, do it properly, my mother-in-law barked from the living room, lounging with her coffee as she tossed sarcastic comments my way. Frustrated, I chose to ignore her, hoping she'd stop, but suddenly, she flew into a rage. How dare you ignore me? You're nothing but a mere daughter-in-law without a real job, she shouted. I tried to focus on my cleaning, her hurtful words blurring in the background, but she wouldn't let up, storming over and yelling, still ignoring me? People like you, unemployed and uneducated, don't belong here. In her anger, she suddenly splashed her hot coffee water at me. It's hot, please stop, I cried reflexively, stunned by her aggression. Fortunately, the water wasn't scalding, so I avoided serious burns. but I was shaken. She smirked, her expression cold. This is exactly what I mean. If you're not working, then leave. Drained and hurt, I realized I'd had enough. Fine, I'll leave. Good, she replied sharply. That makes it easier for everyone. Leave now. I quickly packed my belongings, unwilling to endure another moment of her hostility, and left the house that very day. When I arrived at my parents' home, they were surprised by my sudden appearance but welcomed me with open arms, offering the warmth and relief I desperately needed. I waited for a call from Eric, but days passed with no messages or attempts to reach out. Feeling isolated, I decided not to contact him until he made the effort. A month went by at my parents' house, and still, nothing from Eric. With each silent day, my affection for him dwindled, and I began considering divorce. Then, early one morning, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Glancing at the monitor, I was stunned to see both Eric and my mother-in-law outside. What now? I muttered, baffled by their sudden appearance after all this time. Yes, how can I help you? I asked through the intercom. I've forgiven you, now come back home, my mother-in-law barked, her tone as cold as ever. Forgiven me? For what? I replied, perplexed. I hadn't done anything needing her forgiveness. Frustrated, I ended the call, but they remained, knocking on the door more forcefully. Don't ignore us, just come back, she yelled, her voice echoing down the street. Not wanting to create a scene, I reluctantly opened the door and let them in. After they settled on the sofa, I asked the purpose of their sudden visit. It was baffling, considering she was the one who'd insisted I leave. Now, here she was, asking me to return. You were the one who told me to leave. I don't see why I should come back now, I stated firmly. My mother-in-law huffed, accusing me of being childish. She claimed she'd forgiven me and expected me to return. She even suggested she was doing me a favor by letting someone unemployed and uneducated stay in her home. But I'm not the unemployed one, that's Eric, and if I go back, you'll just exploit me as before. What about your son? Does his employment status not matter? I retorted, hoping to clarify the truth. Eric looked startled, and my mother-in-law was visibly confused. It became clear that he hadn't told her about his job loss. Pressed further, Eric finally admitted he'd been laid off. Apologies and justifications followed, with Eric confessing he'd been relying on my income to keep things stable. My mother-in-law, furious, scolded him for hiding his unemployment. Why keep this a secret? What are we supposed to do now? She demanded. Eric tried to reassure her that my income would suffice temporarily, but she only grew more agitated, calling him useless for not actively seeking a job. Fed up with his excuses and this entire ordeal, I couldn't believe they expected me to just return and pretend as if nothing had happened. When she insisted I come back, I refused, pointing out all the mistreatment I'd endured. Their visit quickly escalated into a heated argument. When I brought up the time she poured hot water on me, Eric turned to her, horrified. Why would you do that? He asked, stunned. She admitted to acting out because she felt ignored, triggering an argument between her and Eric. Their shouting became so intense that I had to intervene, reminding them that this wasn't their home to create a scene. At this, they seemed to change tactics, shifting from demands to pleas, promising they'd never mistreat me again. I could see through their empty assurances. Eric's promise to find a job sounded hollow, and my mother-in-law's vow to change seemed just as insincere. I voiced my doubts, explaining that I could no longer trust them not to take advantage of me. Their silence only confirmed my suspicions. Leaving them in the living room, I went to my room to gather my thoughts. 10 minutes later, I returned to find them sitting in silence, heads bowed, apparently reflecting on the situation. Exasperated, I broke the silence. How long are you going to sit here? It doesn't change anything for me, I said. Instead of further words, I took a decisive action. I handed Eric a document I'd prepared in advance, a signed divorce form. Eric looked down at the document, his face filled with shock and disbelief. I looked directly at Eric and said bluntly, "It's a divorce form. I'm done with someone who refuses to find a job and didn't even bother to reach out after I left." "Wait, don't do this, it's too sudden," Eric pleaded, but his stubborn refusal to acknowledge his own faults only fueled my resolve. I stood firm, determined to move forward and leave behind the chaos that had consumed my life. My decision was final, and there was nothing he could say to change it. Eric, still reeling, tried to question if divorce was too drastic. "No," I replied, resolute, "this situation is your responsibility." I cast the same sharp look at his mother, making it clear that her actions had played no small part in my choice. Reluctantly, Eric signed the papers, warning me not to regret it. Yet, I felt only relief, certain that any regret would be his to bear, not mine. "I'll submit the papers. I don't want anything from you. Just go home," I stated, finalizing our separation with a deep sense of release. Breaking free felt harsh, But I knew it was the only way to escape the relentless mistreatment from my mother-in-law and the weight of Eric's unchanging situation. 3 weeks later, as I settled into the calm of my parents' home, I received an unexpected call from my former mother-in-law. She informed me that her house's electricity and gas had been cut off and hinted that I might somehow be responsible. I calmly explained that I'd stopped covering their expenses once we divorced. Desperate, she asked me to cover just 1 more month. The request was absurd. We were no longer family, and I was no longer obligated to support her household. I declined, suggesting she turn to Eric, who had promised to find work. When she continued to beg, I held firm, ending the call and blocking her number to finally cut all ties. At last, I had severed the toxic connections that had bound me. Gradually, life became peaceful and simple, far removed from the tense and exhausting days I'd left behind. At my parents' home, I rediscovered a sense of ease and tranquility, grateful to have distanced myself from such a toxic past. Several months later, while on a quiet holiday, I received a message from Eric. He apologized for everything, admitted his past dependence on me, and shared that he was now working at a factory. He even mentioned that his mother's behavior hadn't improved, saying he missed me and hoped I might return. But reading his words, I felt no urge to reconnect. Instead, I blocked his number, choosing to firmly close that chapter. 8 months after the divorce, I was introduced by a friend to someone new, a kind, dependable man who treated me with genuine respect. Despite our age difference, we shared a strong connection. We weren't rushing toward anything serious, but the moments we spent together were filled with warmth and laughter. He brought stability and joy back into my life, allowing me to focus on the present and enjoy a sense of true peace. With him, I found myself truly moving forward, grateful for each day and feeling hopeful for what the future might bring. Hello, I'm Shirley, a 31-year-old office worker. A year ago, I married Mason, a man I met on a blind date. After 1.5 years of dating, he proposed. It had always been my dream to settle down, so I accepted, even though it felt a bit rushed. Reflecting now, I realize I should have approached things with more caution. Shortly after our wedding, Mason made the surprising decision to change jobs. When I asked him why, he explained that his previous role hadn't allowed him to showcase his talents. To my shock, he had already resigned and planned to leave his job at the end of the month. He quickly secured a new position, but it paid less than his previous one. Initially, I wasn't too worried because I was employed too. However, soon after, Mason began insisting that I quit my job. I might have considered it if his new salary could support us both, but it was lower, and he kept promising it would increase soon without any clear timeline. Quitting under such uncertain financial circumstances felt reckless. We relied on my income to save and cover our basic expenses, like rent and car payments. It simply wasn't feasible to depend solely on Mason's reduced salary. One evening, Mason confronted me with divorce papers, seemingly to intimidate me. "You know I'm ready for this whenever," he declared. I urged him to calm down and reconsider his words. Unfazed, he retreated to his room. This confrontation made me reflect on the hasty decisions and unexpected twists that had come since meeting him. I told Mason I wouldn't quit my job until his salary improved. He seemed to accept this at first, but the topic kept resurfacing. Every time he brought it up, I reiterated my stance. Now, a year into our marriage, his salary hadn't changed, yet he continued to press the issue. "When are you going to quit?" he would ask. Though I often wanted to snap back sarcastically, I restrained myself, knowing our financial stability hinged on my income. If quitting was so important to him, I felt he should focus on advancing his own career. As time passed, I began to understand why Mason was so adamant about me leaving my job. This became especially clear during our visits to his parents. Whenever we were with his mother, Martha, Mason would express his desire to ease her burdens. She would thank him, and then he would look at me pointedly, as if urging me to resign. He claimed his mother needed help, but Martha was far from helpless. She was active, healthy, and even had a part-time job that supported her hobbies and social life. It became evident that she didn't need my assistance. Yet Mason persisted. "If only one of us could be home during the day, we could check on Mom regularly," he once suggested out of nowhere. It sounded overwhelming and unnecessary. When I asked him what exactly he expected me to do, he listed mundane tasks like housework and errands. It was clear he had specific ideas about my role, yet none warranted abandoning my career. This ongoing cycle of requests was exhausting. I needed Mason to recognize that while I was willing to support his family when necessary, quitting my job without a valid reason was not a decision I could make lightly. "But Martha has her part-time job and spends most of her days out with friends, right?" I countered when he suggested I handle housework during the day. His response left me baffled. Was he suggesting I become his mother's maid? Mason seemed more concerned with maintaining a particular image in front of his parents than addressing the reality of the situation. If he was so eager to care for them, Why wasn't he tackling the household chores himself? Despite his insistence, I stood firm in my decision not to quit my job. I also chose to limit my visits to my in-laws, making an effort to see them only during major holidays. In reflecting on these visits, I noticed a pattern. Mason often delegated tasks to me. He would ask me to tidy up, assist his mom, or run errands. I pushed back against these requests. When he suggested I go to the store, I would retort, "Don't you know this area better than I do?" His response was always that it wouldn't look right for him to do it himself, a rationale that felt both puzzling and manipulative. It seemed he was more focused on controlling the situation and maintaining an image of familial care than genuinely caring for either his parents or me. Over time, my perception of Mason shifted. It seemed he was more invested in appearances than in true affection or respect for me. When I finally confronted him, asking why he didn't help out or consider quitting his job to care for his mother, his reaction was revealing. He looked disgusted and uncomfortable, saying, "That's not something I'm supposed to do. I'm giving you these instructions so my mom will think you are a considerate, useful wife. I hope you realize how kind I am to you." His words laid bare his intentions. He wanted to offload all the demanding tasks onto me and present himself as virtuous for doing so. But I am not his servant or subordinate, nor do I deserve to be disrespected in front of my in-laws. It became increasingly clear that Mason's priorities were skewed, valuing appearances over genuine partnership and support. If Mason continues with his unreasonable demands, I refuse to remain silent. I'll stand my ground. Despite numerous discussions, he shows no signs of change, constantly pestering me with the same old question, "Are you going to quit your job?" Each time we visit my in-laws, he insists on bossing me around, just as he always has. Reaching my breaking point, I knew it was time for a serious conversation. "We need to talk about our future," I began, hoping to steer the discussion toward something productive. "What are you trying to say?" Mason snapped, clearly irritated. "I'm honestly fed up. I'm tired of you nagging me about quitting my job, and I'm exhausted from the pressure to care for Martha." I laid out my concerns. "Why do you feel that way? You're my wife. It's your responsibility to help take care of your husband's parents." He shot back, "But isn't it a bit much to place that burden entirely on me? Shouldn't you, as their son, be responsible for helping with housework and looking after your parents in the first place?" I challenged his outdated views. "Absolutely not. It's the wife's job to do it. Are you saying you don't care about family?" Mason accused, his frustration evident. "I'm disappointed to hear you say that." Sensing a chance to highlight the double standard, I pressed, "Let me ask you this, how have you been caring for my parents? If I asked you to look after them, would you do it?" Mason stared at me blankly, clearly not grasping the connection. "What do you mean? Why should a husband take care of his wife's parents?" "So, does that mean you won't care for my parents now or ever?" I pressed, trying to underscore his inconsistency. "The responsibilities for each set of parents are completely different," he replied, missing my point entirely. "What difference does that make?" I asked, my frustration growing. "I didn't realize you were so oblivious. It's like talking to my old boss." I continued, disheartened by Mason's lack of understanding. "What are you talking about?" Mason asked, confusion etched on his face. "I'm saying that your parents should come first, and you should also take care of my parents," I explained, trying to stress the importance of mutual support and shared responsibilities. Frustrated, I added, "So you only prioritize your own family by blood? I'm incredibly disappointed in you. I won't be visiting your parents anymore." "Why would you do that? Enough is enough. I'm the one who wants you to stop this nonsense," he retorted. "No way. How dare you talk back to me? My mom is right," Mason shot back, his temper rising. "Ha, Mom said you're a badly behaved wife. That's why she gave me this." He pulled a piece of paper from his bag, revealing divorce papers. "What, you had divorce papers ready?" I was taken aback, but Mason appeared almost proud. "See? I scared you, didn't I? I'm prepared for this anytime, so think about what you just said," he said smugly before retreating to his room. Unbelievable. How can Mason be so selfish? That triumphant look on his face, it's obvious those divorce papers are just a threat to make me comply. And with Martha involved, my suspicions deepened. Mason is acting like a puppet for his mom, trying to control me while following her orders. It's absurd. I won't let him manipulate me like this. How can he not see that our marriage is falling apart? His ignorance just frustrates me even more. Mason had already filled out the divorce papers and handed them to me, signed with witnesses, including Martha and his friends. This meant I could file them whenever I chose. The next day, after Mason left for work, I filled out the divorce papers and submitted them to the city office. To be safe, I also filed a notice of non-acceptance for the marriage certificate. I called my parents to explain the situation, anticipating that Mason might threaten to file a marriage certificate on his own. Initially shocked by my decision, they quickly rallied to support me. Outraged by Mason's behavior, They offered to help me move my things. I took a leave from work, and my parents came over to help relocate my belongings to their house while Mason was away. I decided to stay with my parents for a while. For the first time in ages, I felt truly comfortable and at ease in their home. Reflecting on my marriage, I realized that Mason had never pulled his weight around the house. I was the one cooking dinner after long workdays and managing all the cleaning and laundry on my days off. On top of that, he expected me to care for his parents, which was simply unfeasible. That evening, Mason called, probably just back from work. "Hello? Hey, where are you right now?" he asked. "I'm at my parents' house," I replied. "Why would you go back there without my permission? And where's all your stuff? Don't tell me you're staying the night," he demanded, his tone revealing surprise and entitlement. I almost laughed at how oblivious he was, thinking I was just staying overnight when I had taken most of my belongings. "I'm not coming back," I said firmly. "What are you talking about? Come back here and make me some food," he ordered. "Make it yourself," I replied, ending the call. I couldn't entertain a conversation about divorce if he continued to dismiss me like that. I decided to wait for him to come to my parents' house and blocked his number for some peace. A week later, Mason showed up at my parents' home, flanked by his parents. They all wore serious expressions as we faced off in the living room, 3 against 3. "How could you do this? How could you leave without my permission?" Mason demanded, incredulity and accusation in his voice. "You were treating me like a housekeeper, Mason. All I ever asked was that you take care of your family responsibilities," I responded, standing my ground. "That's not true. What kind of wife am I if I don't take care of Mason?" Martha glared at me, her eyes fierce. My father trembled with anger, but I quickly interjected. "Mason told me to quit my job and care for Martha, claiming it was my duty as his wife. Yet when it comes to my own family, he expects me to manage everything alone. Ultimately, Mason wants obedience and expects me to take care of his parents while he takes the credit for it. That's why he prioritizes his parents over mine." "Have you heard Mason say these things?" Martha continued to glare, but Liam looked confused, indicating he hadn't been aware of this before. "Let me clarify something," Mason said abruptly, bringing up the divorce papers and insisting it was all Martha's idea. "Why would you suggest that?" Liam asked, clearly taken aback. "Oh no, it's because Camila has an attitude problem," Martha stammered, flustered. "And did you say that Camila's parents aren't a priority?" I pressed. "Well, naturally, your parents come first," Martha shot back defensively. "That's absurd. I came here to support you after hearing about the unfair treatment Camila endured. Yet it seems like you're the one in the wrong. Don't hide behind her parents' authority to justify your behavior," Liam said, making Mason visibly shrink in his seat. Liam then turned to me and my parents. "I sincerely apologize for the trouble caused by my foolish son. I will have a serious talk with him." "Liam, you're not to blame, so please don't apologize," I reassured him. "Thank you for your kindness, but there's something else I need to say," I continued, turning to a nervous Mason. "About those divorce papers you gave me, I've already filed them. We're no longer married." Both Mason and Martha went pale. "Why did you file them without my permission?" Mason demanded, shock evident in his voice. "You told me I could file them whenever I wanted. Besides, you had already completed your part and had Martha sign as a witness," I explained calmly, but Mason seemed at a complete loss for words. Seeing the rising tension, Liam, furious, stepped in. "Mason, you used divorce as a threat," he exclaimed, and unable to hold back his anger, slapped Mason across the face. Martha looked visibly shaken at the sight. Liam turned to me, his expression sincere. "I deeply apologize that you had to witness this. You have every right to divorce this fool. On behalf of Mason, I'm truly sorry for the mess he's made of your marriage," he said, gripping Mason's collar tightly as he demanded apologies from both Mason and Martha before ushering them out of the house. Later, I expressed my gratitude to Liam for his intervention. He assured me that all of Mason's assets and property would be transferred to me without issue. Given my higher income and the efforts I had made to manage our household, it was a huge relief to secure everything from our marriage. I later learned that Liam had divorced Martha, clearly appalled by her actions. One day, I ran into a colleague from Mason's old workplace who shared some surprising news. Mason had been struggling at his job and frequently received harsh criticism from his boss. In a fit of defiance, Mason resigned and switched jobs, which only fueled my frustration with him. Rather than owning up to his shortcomings, he continued to blame others, which likely contributed to his lower pay at the new position. Now, I feel relieved to have left him behind. I've rented a cozy apartment and am enjoying my newfound independence. Work is going well, and I recently received a raise. At this point, I'm not interested in relationships. I want to focus on my career. Mason always prioritized appearances over genuine abilities. maintaining a facade at home while failing to advance professionally. Unfortunately, many spouses wield divorce threats as a form of leverage, mistakenly thinking it gives them power. I hope they come to understand the folly of their actions and find happiness on their own. As for me, I'm grateful to have moved on from Mason and look forward to the possibility of meeting someone special when I'm ready. I recently bought a high-rise condominium directly across from the train station. It's a remarkable place, with breathtaking views and immaculate rooms, but I can't quite wrap my head around why he suddenly brought it up, especially since it was his purchase. What's truly shocking is that he bought this luxurious condo while I was visiting my parents. Can you imagine? I'm left wondering where he found the money for such an extravagant purchase. Amidst my disbelief, he casually mentioned that the down payment came from selling our old home. He even announced his plans to move in with his parents, leaving me behind. Without so much as a discussion, he asked me to leave. I was so taken aback that I could hardly respond. My name is Carol, a 31-year-old housewife, and I'm 8 months pregnant. The excitement of meeting my baby grows daily, but so does my anxiety about childbirth. My husband, Terry, is 33 and works for a prominent company. We've been married for 4 years, and after struggling to conceive, I was overjoyed to finally be pregnant. Now, however, I find myself feeling more nervous than ever. To escape the tension, I often visit my in-laws. During one such visit, Terry's sister-in-law, Madison, asked me, "So, Carol, you're about to have a baby, what do you think motherhood will be like?" Honestly, it still feels surreal. Madison is married to Terry's brother and is one of the reasons I enjoy visiting my in-laws. Although I don't talk much with my brother-in-law, I've grown close to Madison. As a fellow housewife living with my in-laws, she stepped up to care for my mother-in-law after her mobility declined 2 years ago. My mother-in-law uses a cane but manages well on her own. Still, Madison, with her background in caregiving, stepped in without hesitation when she learned of her mother-in-law's challenges. I admire her decisiveness, especially since Madison and my brother-in-law have a 4-year-old daughter. Her experience as a mother reassures me and eases my worries about pregnancy and childbirth. As my due date approached, I decided to stay at my parents' house to prepare for the birth. Shopping for baby items and daydreaming about our future brought me joy, especially after such a long absence from their home. However, 3 days past my due date, I began experiencing contractions. I tried reaching out to Terry, but he was unresponsive. Initially, I thought he might be busy with work or caught up in something, but as my labor pains intensified, I had no time to ponder his absence. All that mattered was the impending arrival of our child. Eventually, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The overwhelming joy of holding her for the first time eclipsed everything else. My husband, who had promised to be there, missed the birth. Exhausted from the delivery, I sent him a text to announce our daughter's arrival before drifting off to sleep. When I woke, I heard someone calling my name. "Are you still asleep? Huh? Terry, is it morning already?" I opened my eyes to find him and his parents standing there, despite my previous request for privacy after the delivery. "Why didn't you come yesterday?" I asked, irritation creeping into my voice. He avoided my question, responding casually, "It couldn't be helped." His nonchalance frustrated me even more. I was caught between the joy of my daughter's birth and the disappointment of my husband's absence when I needed him most. He had chosen to go out for sushi with his parents, claiming it was a prior commitment. Even after their meal, he didn't visit the hospital because he had been drinking, reasoning that he would be more of a nuisance in that condition. It stung to think he was out enjoying himself while I was in labor. When he finally arrived, blissfully unaware of my annoyance, he asked, "Where's our baby?" "She's in the nursery, a healthy baby girl," I replied. My mother-in-law grimaced and muttered, "What a girl, such a useless wife," her harsh words stunning me. My father-in-law echoed her disappointment, calling both Madison and me pathetic. Instead of receiving gratitude for enduring childbirth, I was met with criticism. Even Terry wasn't pleased. "Oh, damn it, I knew it was a girl but hoped for a boy," he said, reflecting his parents' sentiments about wanting a grandson, especially since their first grandchild was also a girl. Their disappointment stung, but to me, our baby's gender didn't matter. She was precious no matter what. In that moment, Terry sided with his parents, deepening my dismay. My anger simmered beneath the exhaustion from childbirth, leaving me too drained to confront them further. Thankfully, a nurse overheard our conversation and intervened, asking them to leave and granting me some much-needed peace. Since then, Terry hasn't come to visit us in the hospital. On the day we were discharged, I called my parents to pick us up. I wanted to escape the tension that awaited us at home. As I sat there, I couldn't help but reflect on how much Terry had changed since we first got married. He used to be so caring, but now he felt distant. I couldn't shake the suspicion that his transformation stemmed from a significant mistake he made at work 2 years ago, which resulted in a substantial loss for his company. While his colleagues managed to soften the blow and shield him from facing the music, that incident had undeniably derailed his career. No matter how hard he worked afterward, he couldn't regain his former standing. This setback might have contributed to his emotional detachment and coldness, even at home. To make matters worse, one of his junior colleagues, someone who had once seemed less competent than him, had been promoted to his boss. This role reversal likely added to the strain he was feeling, making him even more distant and less empathetic. I could see that he was struggling to cope with his past mistakes, and the pressure seemed to make him increasingly irritable over trivial matters. Despite my growing frustration with his behavior, I clung to the hope that the arrival of our baby might inspire him to change, but it seemed he hadn't made any effort to improve, leaving me deeply worried about our family's future. Just as I was lost in my thoughts, Terry's call interrupted me. "Hey, when are you coming back? You've been at your parents' for almost a month since the baby arrived." I wasn't ready to go home yet, but I replied, "Sorry, I'll be back soon. It's time to start fresh and get things together for our daughter." I mentioned that I had many baby items to bring back and asked if he could help with the transport. His response caught me off guard. "No, you don't need to worry about bringing all that stuff back. I actually have something important to discuss with you. Maybe I should have just told you this over the phone instead of asking you to come back." Feeling confused, I pressed him for details. Then he dropped a bombshell. "I bought a high-rise condo right in front of the station." I was taken aback. "What do you mean? Why are you mentioning this now?" He continued to elaborate on the condo's breathtaking views and pristine condition. I struggled to keep up as he revealed he had moved out of our apartment while I was away. "Where did the money come from? You shouldn't be able to afford a loan on your salary." Panic surged through me as he casually added, "I made the down payment by selling our house." I was in shock, struggling to process the fragmented information he was delivering. "What do you mean you sold our house? Where are your parents living now?" His excitement was palpable as he replied, "Mom and Dad are living with me in the condo now. I'm moving in with them, so I won't need a parasite like you around." His declaration hit me like a ton of bricks. He had decided to live with his parents without my consent and was effectively kicking me out. Speechless, I couldn't find the words to respond as he started referring to his parents in a childlike manner, announcing that they were all living together in the condo. To make matters worse, he insulted me, saying, "You're cocky for just being a housewife. You're useless without my salary. Besides, you've been nothing but a couch potato lately." His words cut deep, revealing a harshness that left me questioning not only his love but also our future together. The sudden shifts in his behavior and decisions regarding our lives, made without any consultation, were not just shocking but deeply hurtful. Throughout my pregnancy, as I battled severe morning sickness and prepared for our child's arrival, Terry showed no sympathy. After the baby was born, he callously remarked that I was useless because we had a girl instead of a boy. He even suggested that his parents believed it would be better for him to be with a younger woman who could give him a son, rather than staying with me. On top of that, he mentioned that his parents no longer wanted to live with my brother and his wife, hinting at a lot of family tension. He told me he had stored my belongings in a storage unit and instructed me to retrieve them soon. The conversation turned even colder when he bluntly announced that he had sent me divorce papers and expected me to file them promptly. Without waiting for a response, he hung up. I was left in disbelief, grappling with the reality of being married to such a heartless person. Despite my regrets over my choices, I knew I had to gather my strength for the sake of our daughter. After reflecting on everything, I resolved to cut ties with him and start anew. I refused to let him dictate my life any longer. Divorce? Bring it on, I thought, determined to show him that he would regret this more than I would. My parents were furious when I explained the situation and immediately supported me in taking legal action. As soon as I received the divorce papers, I signed and filed them. 2 weeks later, Terry unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house, furious over a large withdrawal from his bank account. He slammed his bank book on the table and demanded an explanation. Staying calm, I replied, "Haven't you heard of property division? That's what this is. The account is in my name, and I won't give you a cent." Taken aback by my assertiveness, he retorted, "You couldn't have earned that much. Remember, your salary dropped because of your mistake at work. Do you really think you can claim this money?" I stood my ground. "I've been working from home and managed to match your salary. Now we're dividing our assets, especially since you're the one who wanted a divorce." His disbelief was evident. "You're kidding me," he said, stunned. At that moment, my father, who had been silent until now, interjected, "If you want to dispute this, we can settle it in court. How dare you treat my daughter this way?" The tension escalated beyond personal grievances. It was now about legal and financial justice. I was ready to fight for what was rightfully mine and to protect my daughter's future. I regret that my daughter had to endure such turmoil because of Terry. One day, when he attempted to confront us again, my father, who is a police officer, gave him a stern look that sent him scurrying away. That was the moment I finally severed ties with Terry for good, and we settled the division of our assets. Since then, I've been living with my parents, focusing on raising my daughter. The experience of parenting has become more familiar to me, and my daughter's adorable nature brings joy to every day. Life has improved, filled with the happiness that only a child can bring. A few months into our new life, I began receiving persistent calls from an unknown number. Initially, I ignored them, assuming they were work-related, but the caller's determination prompted me to finally answer. To my surprise, it was Terry. "Hello, Carol," he said hesitantly. "What do you want?" I replied, not in the mood for small talk. "How are you doing?" he asked. "Can you come back? I'm having trouble paying the mortgage on the condo, and I might get kicked out soon," he confessed. "Oh, so you're short on cash?" I responded, lacking any sympathy. "Yes, I've used up all my savings. Dad injured his back and had to quit his job, and Mom has been spending money like crazy, bragging to her friends about our life in the condo," he explained, desperation lacing his voice. I wasn't surprised. Terry had never been good with money, and without his father's income and his mother's reckless spending, it was clear he couldn't afford the condo's expenses alone. "My bank balance is zero, and I've been told I need to leave if I can't pay by next week. Please come back, Carol. We loved each other once," he pleaded. I let out a brief laugh, then replied calmly, "Give me a break. You just want to use me whenever it suits you. You're hoping I'll return not just for love, but to handle the bills and the housework, right?" There was a pause, and let's not forget when you called me a parasite. Would I not just be in the way now? He attempted to backtrack. I just chose the wrong words back then. "What about Madison and your brother? Are they still living with your parents?" I pressed. He sighed. "They moved out and are living on their own now. They had a big fight with our parents. My brother wanted Dad to be more sensible with money, but that just made things worse." Terry's situation seemed dire, but it was a product of his own choices, a tangled web of financial mismanagement and family disputes. It was evident he was looking for an easy way out by trying to pull me back into his chaotic life. However, I had moved on, focusing on a brighter, healthier future for myself and my daughter, free from the manipulation of my past with Terry. In the meantime, my brother-in-law, usually composed, finally reached his breaking point. I heard he stormed out after telling his parents he would cut ties with them if they continued to disrespect Madison. It was heartening to see him stand up for her. He really did seem like a decent guy. As for Terry, his plea for me to return was met with disbelief. "Come back to you? Are you serious? I'm already overwhelmed just taking care of our daughter. I don't have the energy to deal with you." I couldn't help but comment on how odd it was for him to still call his parents Daddy and Mommy. It seemed inappropriate for someone his age. He then suggested I bring our daughter over to live with them. "Weren't you planning to live with her when you first asked me to come back?" I challenged, catching him off guard. "I would never let my daughter live with such a despicable father. Don't ever call me again, and if you show up, I'll have my dad arrest you," I warned. I could almost hear him recalling my father's intimidating presence as I hung up and blocked his number. Not long after, Terry tried reaching out again from a different number, prompting me to change mine entirely to cut him off for good. Later, I reconnected with Madison, who reached out to apologize for her silence. She explained that they had moved to the countryside and were struggling to set up the internet. Madison and her family now lived in a peaceful rural area, and she invited me to visit. When I did, I was charmed by the serene setting, an ideal place for a child to grow up. During my visit, my brother-in-law shared that Terry and his parents had been evicted from their condo due to unpaid debts and were now facing financial difficulties, a stark contrast to their previous lifestyle. It felt like a bit of poetic justice. Meanwhile, I was working from home and living comfortably at my parents' house. The flexibility of my job allowed me to spend a few relaxing days at Madison's home. I even started considering the possibility of moving closer to her family in the future, hopeful for what lies ahead for my daughter and me. Reflecting on the entire ordeal, it seemed absurd that Terry would impulsively buy a high-rise condo while I was pregnant, especially given our financial situation. It was a reckless risk for someone with an average income. In any case, I was relieved to be rid of such an unsavory husband. I hope to continue enjoying my peaceful life, perhaps relocating near Madison and her family, where harmony reigned, and fostering a happy environment for my daughter. From the moment we said "I do," it became obvious that my husband, a classic mama's boy, wasn't accustomed to pulling his weight at home. The full extent of his dependency emerged when I told him I'd be leaving on a business trip. His eyes widened in alarm as he asked, "But who's going to take care of me while you're gone?" After a heated exchange, I went ahead with my week-long trip, hoping a break might help clear my mind. When I returned, I found divorce papers waiting on the table alongside a note from him. Since you decided to neglect your duties here, I'll be staying at my parents'. Consider these papers a sign and think things over. My initial anger was overwhelming. How dare he use divorce as leverage? But as I calmed down, I realized maybe this was the clarity I needed. Filing the papers the next day, I thought, maybe a divorce wasn't such a bad idea after all. The following morning, he burst through the door, clearly shocked, and asked, "Where are the divorce papers?" When I told him I'd already submitted them, he looked devastated, completely caught off guard and on the verge of tears. My name is Grace, and at 32, I've built a steady career at a major company. Until recently, I had been single, much to my parents' dismay. They'd been pressuring me to settle down, so I finally tried a dating agency where I met Edward, a younger, soft-spoken man who seemed like a good match. He was considerate and attentive during our courtship, and I felt confident saying yes when he proposed. But married life quickly revealed sides of him I hadn't seen before. We'd been engaged after a short but happy courtship. When I brought him to meet my parents, they imparted the usual advice, reminding me to always support my partner. Next, we visited Edward's family. His father, Arthur, was warm and welcoming, but his mother, Michelle, was less enthusiastic. "Is this the one, Edward?" she asked with a scrutinizing tone. Edward replied, "Yes, Mommy, I want to marry her," his choice of words catching me off guard. Arthur was quick to smooth things over, apologizing for Michelle's bluntness. He even gave Edward some sound advice. "Marriage takes effort. Son, do your best to keep her happy." With a low-key wedding and a new condo gifted by my parents, we started our life together. It didn't take long to see that Edward wasn't accustomed to managing a home. One morning, as I prepared breakfast and started laundry, his alarm rang at 8. Despite several attempts, he wouldn't wake up. Finally, he stirred, only to complain, "Why didn't you wake me sooner?" As he reluctantly joined me in the kitchen, he began critiquing breakfast. "This egg's too runny, and the coffee's too hot," he grumbled. "My mom always made them just right." Fighting the urge to snap, I redid the eggs and cooled the coffee, but when he finished, he left the dirty plate on the table and hurried off, ignoring my reminder to tidy up. "Gee, I'm short on time," he called over his shoulder, while I interrupted my own routine to clean up his mess. Moments later, he called out, "Grace, can you help with my tie?" There he stood, looking helpless with his tie hanging loosely. "You don't know how to tie it?" I asked. He shrugged. "Mommy always did it." Suppressing a sigh, I tied it for him, and somehow, we both made it out of the house. This became our daily pattern. He did little to help, and I often felt like I was his caretaker more than his partner. Every complaint was followed by a "mommy this" or "mommy that," leaving me feeling exhausted and unappreciated. I pushed through, reminding myself of my father's advice about marriage being a lifetime commitment, but the strain was undeniable. Then, unexpectedly, my boss assigned me a week-long business trip. When I told Edward, he paused his video game, staring in disbelief. "A whole week?" he asked, irritated. "Who's going to take care of things here while you're gone?" "You'll have to step up. It's time you learn to manage things around here," I told him. He put down his controller, his eyes fixed on mine. "Isn't it the wife's job to take care of her husband and the house? Are you just ditching your responsibilities?" His words were laced with outdated assumptions. "Are you serious? We both work. We should share the load," I countered, shaking my head. "That's not what I believe," he replied. "Mommy was always on top of everything at home." I couldn't help but respond, but she was a stay-at-home mom, and, honestly, it's a little strange for a grown man to still talk about "mommy" so much. His expression tightened. "What's your issue with me and my mom?" he snapped defensively. "I don't have one," I said, "but you've got to see how dependent you are. You can't wake up on time, you can't tie your tie, and you constantly compare me to her. Maybe it's time to start doing things yourself." His eyes narrowed. "So, this is what you think of me?" This is why I was hesitant about marrying someone older. Maybe I should have listened to my mom and gone for a younger, more easygoing woman. That stung. You know, even in a heated argument, that's crossing a line. "We're married. I didn't sign up for insults and constant comparisons to your mother." The tension was thick, our unresolved issues suddenly too large to ignore, and the reality of how different our expectations were for each other and our marriage loomed over us like never before. I was stunned by his words. With a smug expression, he challenged, "You can't actually want a divorce, can you? Wouldn't want to carry that label, right? And don't forget what your dad said about sticking together." Then, with a hard edge in his voice, he added, "Fine, but if you go on this trip and leave me here, I'm seriously considering a divorce." With that, He turned on his heel and stormed off to our bedroom, leaving me in shock. Yet, even as the surprise lingered, the notion of divorce settled in my mind. I'd struggled with it before, reluctant to disappoint my parents. Now, it felt like something worth considering. With these heavy thoughts, I went to bed. The next morning, I was up early, preparing for my business trip, the weight of our argument still fresh. I nudged Edward, still curled under the covers. "I'm leaving now, better wake up, or you'll be late for work." He responded with a sleepy mumble, and I left, rolling my eyes. Hours later, a text came in from him. "You barely tried to wake me, now I'm late. Did you really go on that trip?" I quickly replied, "I did wake you up, and yes, I'm on my trip, I'll be back in a week." He read the message but didn't respond. Midway through the trip, I called my parents to update them about Edward's behavior and to share my growing thoughts on divorce. I braced myself for a lecture, unsure of how they'd take the news. To my surprise, they offered words of unconditional support. "We had no idea he acted like this. Take your time to think, but don't feel obligated to stay if it's not right. We're here for you, no matter what you decide." Their reassurance brought tears to my eyes. Returning home, I knew a serious conversation with Edward was inevitable. If he didn't show any signs of change, I was ready to take the possibility of divorce more seriously. I walked into the house that evening, surprised to find it empty. On the table was a set of signed divorce papers and a note that read, "Since you ditched the housework, I'm going back to my parents. Look over the papers and think things over." My initial reaction was anger. How dare he use divorce as a threat? But as my frustration faded, I began to see things differently. Maybe this was the sign I needed to end things. With that, I decided to file the papers. When the divorce was finalized, I felt a burden lift from my shoulders. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had in a long time. The next morning, as I enjoyed a quiet coffee, the door swung open, and in walked Edward, clearly upset. "Why didn't you come to my parents to apologize? What's gotten into you?" he demanded, seeing the empty spot where the papers had been. His expression shifted from anger to shock. "Wait, where are the divorce papers?" "Oh, I filed them," I replied calmly. "You did what?" he stammered, looking stunned. "You actually went through with it?" His shock quickly turned to outrage. "I'm calling my parents." "Go right ahead," I replied, unbothered, feeling certain of my decision. An hour later, his parents, Michelle and Arthur, arrived. Michelle stormed in, glaring at me. How could you just divorce Edward like that?" I kept my voice steady. "If he left the divorce papers ready for me, doesn't that suggest he wanted it? Is that a problem?" "How dare you act so bold? You're just his wife," Michelle retorted, but Arthur quickly stepped in with a firm "enough." The room fell silent. Arthur looked at me. "Grace, would you mind explaining what happened?" I nodded and shared the story, our argument, his threats, the papers he'd left. I felt like he was giving up, so I went with it. I finished. Arthur seemed about to respond when Edward broke in. "Mom, Dad, come on, tell her off." Michelle jumped in. "Oh, Edward, my poor boy, she's overreacting, just reverse the divorce." But I held my ground. "There's no going back. It's final, we're done," I said firmly. Michelle's face flushed, and she opened her mouth to speak, but Arthur cut her off. "Enough, Michelle," he said firmly, before turning to me with an apology for Edward's behavior. Then, looking straight at Edward, whose eyes widened in disbelief, Arthur continued, "You fool, I knew you had issues, but using divorce as a threat? That's just absurd. You had this coming." Michelle tried to interject again, but Arthur wasn't finished. "And some of this is on you too, Michelle. You spoiled him rotten. If you don't knock it off, I might consider divorce myself." The room grew tense as Arthur laid bare the reality, leaving both Edward and Michelle speechless. Michelle, visibly shaken, seemed haunted by Arthur's words, glancing at him with worry. Arthur turned back to me, his expression softened by regret. "Grace, I'm truly sorry for the trouble our son has caused you. He has a lot of growing up to do. I hope you find happiness and peace moving forward." I thanked Arthur, appreciating his understanding, and watched as he guided a deflated Edward out of my home. It wasn't long before word of their falling out spread. Arthur took the drastic step of cutting both financial and emotional support from Edward, hoping it would push him to take responsibility for his life. Edward's life soon began to unravel. He moved into a small, run-down apartment, the first place he'd ever lived alone. The adjustment was chaotic. His new home quickly fell into disarray, mirroring his struggling personal life. With no one to rely on and a habit of being late, he soon lost his job, his lack of discipline finally catching up with him. Meanwhile, the family dynamics deteriorated further. Michelle, who had always been deeply enmeshed in Edward's affairs, crossed a line one too many times, which led to a major rift with Arthur. Ultimately, it ended in their separation. Michelle moved in with Edward, and together they struggled to stay afloat, working low-end jobs and making ends meet with difficulty. Their lives seemed trapped in a cycle of unfortunate decisions and mounting setbacks. On the other hand, my life took a different path, free from the weight of my relationship with Edward. The condo felt wonderfully spacious and full of potential. I threw myself into my career with a renewed sense of purpose. With the toxic influence gone, my professional life flourished, and I found a rhythm that filled my days with meaning and progress. My home became a sanctuary, a place of calm and possibility. Each morning brought fresh energy and optimism, a stark contrast to Edward and Michelle's growing struggles. While they were no longer part of my life, the lessons from our time together remained, strengthening my commitment to growth, happiness, and independence.